Hello there, and welcome back to a quieter corner of the world. Maybe it's late where you are, or maybe you've just decided to let the day drift away for a while. Either way, you've arrived at the right moment. Because tonight we're not looking up at the stars, or out across the sea, we're looking down, beneath the soil, beneath the roots, beneath everything you think of as solid, down into a hidden kingdom that's older than trees, older than rivers, and possibly older than the idea of forests themselves. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you'd like, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always a quiet thrill to see this small, sleepy community stretching across time zones, listening together in silence. Now, if you're ready, let's begin. Beneath every step you take, there's a world you never see. A soft, secret architecture, made not of stone or roots, but of threads. They are called hyphae microscopic filaments that reach and branch, twist and merge, building a living network beneath the ground. Each one is thinner than a human hair, but together they form something vast. A lattice so wide and ancient that if you could peel away the top layer of the earth and look below, you'd see a woven fabric glowing faintly with life spreading through forests, meadows, and mountainsides. This is the fungal kingdom, the quiet engineers of the world. It doesn't shout or bloom in bright colors, not most of the time. It hums in silence, feeding on the forgotten. Every fallen leaf, every decaying log, every whisper of rot becomes a feast broken down and rebuilt into soil. Fungi are the planet's recyclers, the ones who take what has ended and turn it into beginnings again. For most of human history, we thought of them as afterthoughts, strange growths that appeared after rain, soft and temporary. But what we see, those mushrooms and molds, are only the fruiting bodies, the surface flowers of something far deeper. The true organism lives below a labyrinth of hyphae that can stretch for miles, linking tree to tree stone to root, root to life. Scientists call these underground threads mycelium, and in many ways they behave like the brain of the planet. Each strand sends out signals, senses, food, and communicates with other cells across distances too small for us to imagine. The network shares resources, redirecting nutrients to where they're needed most. It doesn't think not in the way we do, but it reacts, it remembers, it adapts. If a tree is wounded, mycelium carries the alarm. If a root grows weak, it sends what strength it can. And here's the astonishing part. This isn't a collection of separate individuals. It's one continuous organism that defies the boundaries we expect in life. In Oregon's Blue Mountains, for instance, scientists discovered a single fungal network, Armillaria ostoya, stretching across nearly 4 square miles of forest. It's estimated to be thousands of years old. A single being, quietly pulsing beneath the soil, while civilizations rose and fell above it. To walk across that forest is to tread upon a single living creature, vast and patient beyond our comprehension. If you pause for a moment and imagine it millions of tiny threads weaving through the dark, curling around stones, hugging roots, gently feeding them, it begins to feel almost sacred. Like the planet itself is wrapped in a hidden web of thought and memory, a system so delicate it can sense a change in moisture, and so strong it can hold ecosystems together for centuries. When rain falls, the mycelium drinks first. When something dies, it listens, then begins its work. Nothing is wasted, nothing is forgotten. Even the scent of the forest after a storm, that earthy perfume of damp soil, is partly the breath of fungi exhaling. They're the quiet lungs of the ground. If trees are the lungs of the atmosphere, fungi are the lungs of the soil. Together they keep the world in balance, one breathing upward, one breathing down. They don't compete, they cooperate. That relationship, this deep and ancient partnership is one of the oldest alliances on Earth. Long before trees, fungi were here breaking down rock into soil so that future plants could grow. They shaped the world before roots ever existed. In fact, fossil records suggest that some of the first multicellular organisms on land weren't plants at all. They were massive fungi, towering columns called prototaxites that rose over a barren landscape 400 million years ago. Back then, before forests and flowers, the world's skyline was fungal. Imagine that for a moment, a planet without trees, covered instead by soft mounds of moss, shallow ponds, and pillars of fungus, the height of houses. Their surfaces slick with dew, their interiors hollow their presence, the only vertical life on land. The air must have smelled strange mineral, damp, ancient. It was fungi that prepared that world for what would come next, creating the very ground trees would later root into. We often think of evolution as a ladder, but here it's more like a handshake life, reaching for life across ages. Fungi teaching plants how to survive on land. Plants giving fungi sugars in return. Even today, every forest still relies on that ancient pact. The soil beneath your feet is not separate from the trees above. It's a living dialogue between roots and threads, between what we see and what we don't. And so when you walk through a forest and hear the crunch of leaves underfoot, it isn't just sound, it's contact. A soft exchange with something older than human memory. Beneath that thin layer of dirt invisible to the eye lies an entire civilization of life, organized, responsive, alive. In some indigenous traditions, the ground itself is seen as a kind of living skin, something that listens. That idea, poetic as it is, aligns uncannily with what modern mycology is discovering. Mycelium doesn't simply react to its surroundings. It records patterns, remembers past experiences, and adjusts future growth. In experiments, scientists have shown that fungal networks can learn to navigate mazes or anticipate recurring changes in temperature and light. It's as if, buried in the dark, there's an ancient intelligence humming softly, not one that speaks in words, but in pulses of chemistry, in slow rhythms of exchange. If you could listen closely enough, maybe you'd hear it, the whisper of connections forming, decaying, forming again. The soft hum of communication without sound, a conversation happening just beneath the surface, patient and ongoing. And perhaps that's the secret comfort of knowing about fungi. They remind us that we are standing on something alive, something that doesn't judge or hurry, something that works quietly to make the world whole again. In a world that often feels divided and loud, there's peace in realizing that beneath all the noise, life is still woven together by threads too small to see. As you lie there, maybe with your eyes half closed, think of the ground beneath your home, your city, your bed. Beneath the concrete and the cables, there is still earth. And beneath that, there are threads breathing, sensing, waiting. The kingdom beneath your feet has never gone away. It simply hums below unseen, holding the world together one grain of soil at a time. So as you exhale, imagine yourself sinking gently through the floor, through the soil, through the roots, into that soft twilight world where everything is connected. The air grows cool and earthy. The light fades to gold. Threads brush against you like silk. Nothing speaks, nothing stirs. And yet everything is alive. Welcome to the hidden kingdom beneath our feet. If you've ever walked barefoot on damp soil after rain, you might have felt something strange, a soft, give a sense that the ground beneath you is not solid, but breathing. That's not your imagination. Under every step lies a vast, tangled web of life, a hidden network that moves nutrients, water, and information in ways both physical and mysterious. Scientists call it mycelium, but to think of it as just a collection of fungal threads is like calling the internet a pile of wires. It's something far greater, the living tissue that stitches the world together. Imagine this. A single gram of forest soil, less than a teaspoon, can contain several miles of these microscopic threads. Each filament or hypha reaches out like a question, searching, sensing, testing the terrain for food or contact. When it finds another strand, it fuses, and information begins to flow. Sugars, minerals, even chemical messages that tell nearby plants what's happening. To picture the forest without mycelium is to imagine a city without roads, wires, or water pipes. The trees would still stand, but nothing would connect them. Mycelium is the infrastructure of life, a living web that delivers what each organism needs, and sometimes what it doesn't yet know it needs. When scientists first discovered this underground network, they realized it wasn't just about food. It was about communication. In experiments, trees under attack by pests released distress chemicals through their roots, and nearby trees, even of different species, received the signal through fungal connections. Within hours, those neighboring trees began to produce defensive compounds, as if warned by a whisper passed hand to hand beneath the soil. Some call it the Wood Wide Web, a fitting name, though it existed long before our own digital networks. And like the internet, it doesn't belong to anyone. It simply is a vast democratic space where energy flows according to the quiet logic of cooperation. Mycelium doesn't play favorites. It connects birch to pine, to grass to wildflower, weaving species together into a single community that shares, trades, and sometimes even sacrifices for one another. Picture a seedling sprouting in a shaded part of the forest. It can't reach enough light, and its small roots can't gather much nutrition. But through the fungal web, an older, larger tree nearby may send it sugars, a quiet act of generosity that keeps the young tree alive until it can stand on its own. That's not fantasy, it's measurable. Forest ecologists have seen these exchanges in real-time carbon atoms traveling from one organism to another through the hyphal highway below. It's almost unsettling to realize that cooperation, something we often think of as uniquely human, is one of nature's oldest instincts. Down in the dirt, invisible to us, generosity is a survival strategy. But not everything in this network is harmony. There are freeloaders and deceivers, two parasitic plants that tap into the web to steal sugars from their neighbors. Some fungi themselves grow greedy, taking more than they give. The balance is delicate, dynamic, always shifting, just like any community. The miracle isn't that every connection is pure. It's that the system endures anyway, constantly repairing and adapting like a heartbeat that never stops. In this underground world, even death becomes a form of life. When a tree falls, its roots still pulse for a while through mycelial threads, releasing what remains carbon, phosphorus, nitrogen into the network. Fungi absorb what they can, digesting the wood and recycling its elements into nutrients for the next generation of seedlings. The fallen become food. The old become the foundation for the new. It's a quiet circle that never ends. If you could shrink yourself small enough and wander through this kingdom, it would feel like walking through a glowing forest within a forest. Thin white filaments would arch and branch around you, pulsing faintly with life. Droplets of fluid would move like tiny comets through transparent tubes. Each node you pass would be a junction, a point where decisions are made, where the network chooses a path forward. Some hyphae would withdraw, others would advance. It would look almost intelligent, because in a sense it is. Mycelium doesn't have a brain, but it can solve problems. When confronted with obstacles in the lab, fungal networks find the shortest or most efficient path between two food sources, the same way a city planner might design a subway map. The Japanese scientist Toshiyuki Nakagaki once placed a slime mold, a cousin of true fungi, over a map of Tokyo and sprinkled oats where the city's train stations were located. Within hours, the mold had grown connections that mirrored the real-life rail network, nearly identical in efficiency. Nature, it seems, had already invented optimization long before humans did. But the wonder goes deeper still. Fungi have memory, not the kind we keep in stories or photographs, but one encoded in growth itself. If a patch of mycelium encounters a dry area once, it will avoid that route the next time. If it finds nutrients in one direction, it thickens the threads there like a well-worn path. It learns from experience. It adapts, quietly, persistently. When you think about it that way, it's hard not to see mycelium as a kind of mind, slow, decentralized, endlessly patient. It's not aware in any human sense, but it behaves with purpose. And in its own fungal rhythm, that purpose is astonishingly similar to ours: to connect, to sustain, to endure. If you've ever found yourself feeling alone or cut off, it's strangely comforting to remember that just beneath your feet lies a network built entirely around connection. Every step on the ground, every garden, every park hides this same invisible web, linking life in an unbroken conversation. The trees outside your window may be whispering through it right now, not in words, but in exchanges of carbon, nitrogen, and water, an entire dialogue of sustenance. And it's not just forests. Fungal threads lace through grasslands, tundra, and deserts. They even thrive in volcanic ash-frozen soil and radioactive ruins, places where life should struggle, but somehow doesn't. In those harsh realms, mycelium becomes the first responder, breaking down minerals, trapping moisture, and paving the way for the next wave of life. Wherever the planet needs healing, fungi arrive first. They are the doctors of the dirt, the silent healers of ecosystems. And maybe in their own way, they're teaching us something: that survival isn't about standing alone, but about finding ways to link, share, and rebuild. There's a quiet poetry in knowing that the same network that carries nutrients between trees also grows in the ground beneath cities. Sidewalk cracks, garden beds, forgotten corners behind apartment buildings. They all harbor tiny threads doing the same ancient work. The human world may seem separate, but it isn't. The fungal kingdom doesn't care about fences or property lines. It simply moves where life can move, stitching one world into another. So the next time you see a mushroom pushing up from the soil, try not to think of it as a single organism. Think of it as the visible tip of an iceberg, a signal from a vast hidden mind below. The mushroom is the messenger, the fruiting thought of an underground intelligence. When it releases its spores into the wind, it's speaking in the only language it knows, the language of continuation. And if you listen not with your ears but with your attention, you might feel the same pulse that runs through the earth itself. A quiet thrum beneath everything. A rhythm older than trees, older than the first green leaf, older than memory. That's the wonder of fungi. They don't just live in the world, they weave it. They turn the silence between roots into music, the decay of death into nourishment, the darkness underground into something alive and endlessly creative. So tonight, as you rest, imagine the land beneath you alive with invisible threads. They spread, breathe, and whisper to each other, not in noise, but in patience, in connection, in care. And maybe that's what the earth has been trying to remind us all along, that even in the quietest, darkest places, life is always finding a way to reach out and hold on. Before there were forests, before roots had learned to dig and trees had learned to rise, there was fungus. Not the mushrooms you might imagine, not the delicate caps that bloom after rain, but sprawling, towering structures so strange that early paleontologists mistook them for petrified trees or coral reefs. They called them prototaxites, and for decades no one was sure what they were. But now we know they were fungi. Enormous ones rising more than 8 meters tall, dominating a landscape that was otherwise flat and bare. Picture that scene for a moment. 400 million years ago, the continents were almost silent. The air was heavy, the sky copper-tinted with volcanic haze. There were no birds, no mammals, no trees to shade the soil. The tallest living things were these pillar-like fungi, hollow and porous, their outer skin slick with rain and minerals. Around them spread low mats of moss and liverwort, early plants still struggling to adapt to land. Between them trickled small rivers lined with green scum, the beginning of what we'd one day call ecosystems. The fungi were not just survivors, they were builders. By breaking down rock and digesting minerals, they created the first true soil on land. Their acids chewed through stone, releasing nutrients into a world that had never known roots or leaves. Every grain of fertile earth you touch today, every field, garden, and forest floor is a descendant of their work. Long before photosynthesis made Earth green, fungi made it habitable. Their partnership with early plants was one of the most important alliances in the history of life. When the first primitive roots pushed into the ground, they were immediately colonized by fungal filaments. The plants provided sugars. The fungi delivered minerals and moisture. It was a perfect exchange, one so efficient that it still happens in almost every plant alive today. Wheat, oak, pine grass, all of them rely on this ancient deal. Without it, plants could not have spread across the continents. In a sense, fungi are the original architects of the biosphere. They don't build cities of stone or steel, but of chemistry, invisible scaffolds of connection that let other species rise. Every oak, every blade of grass, every piece of fruit owes something to the dark, quiet labor happening below. Even the air we breathe, rich in oxygen, exists because fungi once helped plants take hold and multiply. It's humbling to think that what we call the green world rests on something not green at all. Colorless threads winding through darkness, making everything possible. And yet, these architects are not content to stay buried. Sometimes they send up signs, brief eruptions of beauty that last only days. The mushroom, the toadstool, the puffball, they are the fruiting expressions of a much larger organism, like thoughts rising from a hidden mind. When conditions are right, moisture, temperature, time, the network awakens and decides to speak. The message is always the same: continue. A mushroom's main purpose is not to decorate the forest or feed passing animals, though both happen by accident. Its purpose is to release spores, microscopic seeds that drift on the breeze, settle on wood, or ride raindrops to new ground. Each spore carries the potential for another network, another life. Billions are released every night from a single mushroom, a shimmering dust invisible to us, but thick enough that in some forests it coats everything in a fine silver film. Those spores are more ancient than pollen, more patient than seeds. They've survived volcanic winters, ice ages, and mass extinctions. They can lie dormant for years, waiting for just the right combination of warmth and moisture to wake them. When they do, they unfurl a single thread, delicate, translucent, and unstoppable. From that one filament grows a colony, then a web, then a world. In this way, fungi became the quiet conquerors of Earth. They spread into every environment imaginable: deserts, tundra swamps, caves, even the frozen wastes of Antarctica. There are fungi that feed on oil, on plastic, on radiation itself. Others live inside volcanic vents, thriving in heat that would melt metal. To them, no boundary is permanent. The planet's crust is simply a canvas waiting to be rewritten. And perhaps that's why so many scientists call them the great recyclers. While animals consume and plants create, fungi transform. They are the middle act between life and death, breaking down what has ended so that new beginnings can emerge. A fallen branch doesn't simply disappear. It's eaten by 1,000 invisible mouths, turned into soft humus, into nutrients, into the base of tomorrow's forest. In every layer of decay, there's a promise: nothing is ever truly lost. That cycle, growth, decay, rebirth, is the rhythm of Earth itself, and fungi keep the beat. Without them, fallen trees would pile up, nutrients would remain trapped, and the forest would choke on its own abundance. Decay might sound grim, but in nature, it's sacred. It's how balance is kept. Close your eyes and imagine standing in a damp woodland after rain. The air smells of soil, sweet and rich. Steam rises from the ground. Under your feet, a billion filaments are waking, feeding, connecting. The sound you hear, that soft hiss of water soaking into the ground, is the sound of renewal. Every droplet that falls feeds the network, and the network feeds the world. When we talk about architects, we usually picture blueprints, design, purpose. But fungi operate by intuition, by an ancient chemistry that knows how to build without knowing that it's building. They sense imbalance and repair it. They sense opportunity and expand. They're nature's improvisers, endlessly creative, never wasteful. And though we've known about them for centuries, we're only beginning to understand how profound their influence is. In 2023, researchers discovered that fungal spores may even play a role in forming rain. They rise invisibly into the atmosphere, hitching rides on air currents, where they attract moisture and trigger condensation. In other words, fungi help the sky decide when to cry. The forest breathes them upward, and they fall back down as rain, completing a cycle that began billions of years ago. So the next time it rains, you can imagine that the clouds above you were seeded by something that once grew quietly beneath your shoes. The architecture of life doesn't stop at the ground. It loops from soil to air to soil again. And this perhaps is the deepest secret of fungi. They do not separate above from below, living from dead, past from present. In their slow, patient chemistry, everything is connected, recycled, renewed. The stones you walk on might once have been trees. The air you breathe may have passed through the pores of a mushroom. Even your own body, the minerals in your bones, the carbon in your breath, will one day return to that same network, folded back into the architecture that began before time had names. We are temporary tenants in their design. And somehow that thought isn't frightening. It's beautiful, because it means nothing we are is ever truly lost. The architects will reclaim us, and from that reclamation, life will continue. So as you drift towards sleep tonight, imagine the world long before trees, a planet of soft hills and glowing fungi shaping everything that would come after. You are walking in their footsteps, breathing their inheritance, living in the shelter they built. The green world may belong to plants, but the living earth, the one beneath, within, and around us, still belongs to them. The first architects, the quiet builders, the oldest kingdom that never needed to be seen to rule. Long before the hum of insects or the shade of forests, Earth was a harsh and silent world. Imagine its continents bare and stony, streaked with iron-red dust and shallow pools of green water, steaming under an alien Sunday. The air was thin, heavy, with carbon dioxide, and the land was almost entirely lifeless. Nothing yet rustled in the wind because there were no leaves. No roots held the soil because there was no soil, only cracked rock and drifting sediment. And yet in this quiet desolation, life was making plans. In the shallows and tidal flats, small clusters of green algae were beginning to dream of life on land. They clung to wet stones, stretching fragile filaments toward the air. But on their own, they could not survive. The ground offered no nutrients, and the radiation from the sun was fierce. The world above the waterline was both a promise and a threat. Then came the fungi. They were already waiting, patient and prepared. Their thin white threads crept over the stone, releasing acids that dissolved minerals into usable forms. In doing so, they created the first primitive soil thin films of life that softened the hard edges of the continents. When those early plants ventured onto dry land, fungi were there to meet them, wrapping around their fragile roots like protective gloves. In exchange for sugars made through photosynthesis, the fungi provided phosphorus, nitrogen, and water drawn from deep crevices in the rock. It was a partnership older than any forest, an alliance that turned a hostile wasteland into the foundation of the green world. Scientists believe this union, called mycorrhiza, was the turning point in Earth's history. Without it, plants might never have survived on land at all. Fossil evidence shows that this partnership began at least 460 million years ago, before true roots even existed. Early plants had rhizoids, simple hair-like structures, not capable of deep absorption. The fungi acted as their missing organs, their underground lungs. Together, they breathed the first oxygen-rich air over the land. Every handful of soil that exists today is the direct descendant of that moment, a fusion of two worlds, microbial and botanical learning to coexist. Picture that first dawn, when a green film began to spread across the shorelines. The ground glistened, the wind smelled faintly of newness, and microscopic filaments were weaving the first blankets of moss. The rocks, once silent, now crackled faintly with the sound of life breaking in. The fungi continued their patient work, feeding and protecting the new plant settlers. And over millions of years, those tiny pioneers evolved into mosses, ferns, and eventually towering trees. But none of that could have happened without the quiet labor of the fungal world beneath. It's strange to think that everything we see, every blade of grass, every tree in your favorite park, is standing on an inheritance from that ancient alliance. When we look at a forest now, we see trunks, leaves, and light. But beneath all that hidden in the soil, the same collaboration still unfolds. Daily plants feeding fungi, fungi feeding plants. The partnership that gave land its first breath has never ended. If you could shrink yourself to the size of a grain of sand and travel through the root zone of a forest, you'd witness a breathtaking choreography. Hyphae, those microscopic threads of fungi, would stretch around the root hairs like lace gloves. They'd pierce cell walls, delicately exchanging nutrients, molecule by molecule. The air would shimmer with chemical messages, electrical impulses, and water droplets, carrying energy from one living being to another. It would look almost like a city not built of stone and steel, but of living light. Some fungi even form small sheaths around roots, creating what scientists call ectomycorrhizal networks. Others go deeper, slipping inside the plant cells in intricate branching shapes called arbuscules. In both cases, it's intimacy on a scale that defies imagination, a literal merging of two lives. And yet this intimacy isn't ownership, it's cooperation. Each side gives exactly what the other cannot provide. When rain falls on the forest, it's the fungi that drink first, soaking up moisture and passing it along to the trees. When sunlight filters through leaves, it's the trees that return the favor, sending down carbohydrates through their roots to feed their invisible partners. It's a perfect cycle, a dance written into the DNA of life itself. The balance is so precise that when fungi vanish, ecosystems collapse. Deforestation, pollution, and soil erosion don't just remove trees, they sever these ancient partnerships. Fields that have been stripped of fungi lose their ability to regenerate. Crops weaken, forests fail to recover, and the cycle of life slows to a halt. It's as if the earth forgets how to breathe. That's why modern ecologists speak of the fungal renaissance, a growing realization that the health of the planet depends as much on the soil's hidden life as on the trees that rise from it. To heal the land, we must first heal its oldest relationships. But beyond science, there's something deeply poetic in this story. The idea that life's first steps onto land weren't solitary or heroic, but collaborative, that survival was born not from competition, but from partnership. The green world didn't conquer the barren earth, it was invited in. And maybe that's why forests feel so peaceful. When you walk among trees, you're surrounded by the echo of that first alliance, a memory older than memory. Each breath of oxygen, each rustle of leaves, is the sound of fungi and plants, keeping their ancient promise. Sometimes when the wind moves softly through the canopy, It sounds like the planet exhaling. It's the same exhale that began 500 million years ago when fungi and algae joined forces to create a new kind of world. In the great timeline of life, that partnership marked a shift as profound as fire or flight. It turned the land from stone to soil, from silence to song, and we distant descendants of that transformation still live in its rhythm. Every loaf of bread, every sip of wine, every breath we take is a small echo of that first conversation between fungus and plant. Close your eyes and picture that ancient earth again, the moment just before green, the sunlight heavy and red, the land raw and unshaped. Then, like a quiet dawn, the first mats of algae creep forward, guided by invisible fungal threads. The air trembles with chemical whispers, the beginning of an ecosystem forming out of nothing. That was the world's first inhale, the planet drawing breath through the lungs of its smallest architects. And when you walk barefoot on grass today, you are standing on that memory. Each step presses down on a living network that has been at work for hundreds of millions of years, still performing the same miracle, turning stone into soil death, into life isolation, into connection. It's easy to overlook the ground because it's always beneath us. But the next time you feel the cool dampness of earth between your fingers, remember you're touching history and the very substance of the planet's first breath. Because long before forests sang and rivers learned to curve fungi and plants, looked at the empty world and decided to build something together. And they've never stopped. If the forest seems quiet, it's only because we don't yet know how to listen. Every tree you see, every pine, birch and fern is part of a vast underground conversation. We just happen to walk above it, deaf to its frequency. What seems like stillness is actually traffic nutrients, water, electrical pulses, and chemical whispers flowing through the soil like invisible speech. This is the wood-wide web, nature's oldest and most intricate network. The idea might sound poetic, but it's real science. For decades, botanists believed that trees competed ruthlessly for sunlight and space, that the forest was a battlefield of roots and leaves. Then researchers began tracing carbon isotopes in the soil, little chemical signatures that travel from one plant to another. And what they found overturned everything we thought we knew trees share. A birch tree in full summer light can send sugars through the fungal network to a shaded fir that's struggling to photosynthesize. In winter, when the birch loses its leaves, the flow reverses, the evergreen gives back. This isn't myth or metaphor. It's measurable atoms of carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus passing between species, coordinated through a living fungal web. If you could see it happening, it would look like the earth breathing. Glowing threads of mycelium, branching and merging, carrying resources like blood through veins. Where two roots touch, the exchange brightens small pulses of light representing molecules on the move. It's quiet, unhurried, perfectly balanced. At the center of many of these networks stand what scientists call mother trees. They're not necessarily the tallest or oldest, but they're the best connected. A single mother tree can link to hundreds of others through mycelium sharing nutrients, chemical signals, even what some call memory. When seedlings sprout in the shade, the mother tree funnels food to them, ensuring they survive their fragile youth. When drought strikes, she can send warning signals, prompting nearby trees to close their pores and conserve water. It's as if the forest has a nervous system, slow, diffuse, but incredibly wise. And the most astonishing part, it doesn't just share information, it shares intention. When a tree is attacked by insects, it releases chemical compounds through its leaves and roots. These signals travel through the fungal threads, alerting its neighbors to prepare defenses. The nearby trees then begin producing toxins or bitter sap to make themselves less appetizing. It's a community response, not panic, but preparation. The forest doesn't scream. It murmurs. We often think of intelligence as something that belongs to individuals, a brain, a mind, a center of thought. But in the forest, wisdom is collective. It isn't stored in one place, but spread across thousands of miles of filament. The mycelial network doesn't decide. It balances. It doesn't think. It harmonizes. And in this slow-motion conversation, time moves differently. While human messages flash through fiber optic cables in milliseconds, fungal signals drift through the soil in minutes, sometimes hours. They move at the pace of rain, of roots of life itself. The forest's internet doesn't chase urgency. It moves with the rhythm of patience. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine you're standing in a deep forest, maybe cedar, maybe pine. The light filters through the canopy, shifting in gentle waves. Beneath your feet, the ground feels alive, springy, warm. Beneath that lies a world of threads, millions of tiny tendrils stretching in every direction, touching everything alive. You can almost sense it, the pulse of life beneath the stillness. Now imagine the flow of information not as sound, but as a hum. The tree beside you exhales carbon through its roots. A fungus takes it, passes it along, trades it for nitrogen, gathered from a dying log a few meters away. That nitrogen moves again into another tree, another leaf, another breath. The exchange never stops. Life here is a continuous conversation between what grows and what decays, and that conversation extends beyond trees. Shrubs, grasses, even flowers connect to the same underground web. When a meadow blooms, the colors you see above are mirrored below in invisible pathways. The fungal network ensures no part of the ecosystem goes unheard. It redistributes what the strong have in excess to those who are weak, not out of kindness, but out of balance. Balance is the law of the wood wide web. When one part thrives too much, it shares. When one part suffers, it receives. Through this equilibrium, forests maintain stability over centuries, surviving droughts, storms, fires, and time itself. The fungi never stop mediating the diplomats of the biosphere, fluent in the chemistry of connection. Some scientists hesitate to use words like communication or cooperation, afraid they sound too human. But perhaps we're the ones borrowing from them, not the other way around. The forest has been networking for 500 million years. Our own internet, with its cables and data packets, is just a crude echo of a system perfected long before humanity took its first breath. And sometimes that connection goes even deeper, literally. In ancient forests, mycorrhizal networks can stretch across entire valleys, linking generations of trees into a single superorganism. When one tree dies, its stored carbon and minerals are not lost. They are absorbed, redistributed, reborn. Death in this system isn't an ending, it's a transfer. Think of how comforting that is, to know that even in decay, nothing disappears. A fallen oak doesn't vanish into silence. It becomes the language the forest continues to speak. In the human world, we're used to thinking of communication as words sound meaning. But in the fungal world, communication is chemistry, the subtlest form of dialogue. It doesn't persuade, argue, or demand. It simply responds. A molecule leaves one root and finds another, and from that life continues. And perhaps that's the truest kind of conversation, one without ego, without noise. Just an endless cycle of giving and receiving, where every participant understands that to survive, they must stay connected. So the next time you find yourself alone in the woods, try standing still. Don't move, don't speak. Just breathe. Listen not with your ears, but with your imagination. Feel the pulse in the soil, the slow heartbeat beneath the moss. The trees are speaking not in words, but in the ancient language of exchange. And if you stay long enough, if you let the quiet settle into you, you might begin to understand that this web isn't limited to forests at all. It extends to the grass in your garden, the moss on a stone wall, even the air you breathe. We are all of us connected to it, even if we've forgotten how to listen. The next time you open your window and smell rain on dry ground that's scent petrichor is partly fungal. The molecules that carry it, geosmin and 2-methylisoborneol, are produced by microbes and fungi when water touches the soil. That smell, we love so much, the smell of life returning, is literally the earth speaking to us. It's the forest's quiet way of saying, I'm still here, I'm still breathing. And perhaps that's the greatest truth of the wood wide web. It isn't just under the forest, it's under us. Every step we take, every breath we draw, rides on that invisible network. It's the unseen bloodstream of the planet, slow, generous, eternal. The forest is not a collection of trees, it's a single breathing mind. And the next time you walk through it, remember, it's listening too. Every great civilization begins with a pact, a moment when two worlds decide they are better together than apart. For life on Earth, that pact was struck not between kings or creatures, but between two kingdoms, plants and fungi. Their union, born hundreds of millions of years ago, was not just an alliance. It was the spark that transformed barren rock into a living world. To understand how deep that partnership runs, imagine time not as a line, but as a spiral. We travel backward through its coils past the rise of forests and the age of dinosaurs, past the oceans filling with coral and shell, until we reach a planet still raw and red from volcanic birth. Land is empty. The seas churn with green microbial life, and the first primitive algae are inching toward the shore. They need a bridge between water and rock, and the fungi waiting there provide one. The fungi extend their filaments into cracks in the stone, extracting minerals. The algae, early ancestors of plants, offer sugars spun from sunlight. It's a trade so balanced, so elegant, that evolution decides to keep it. Over time, the partnership becomes inseparable. Even as plants evolve leaves, stems, and roots, they never outgrow their fungal allies. The fungi weave themselves into the roots of nearly every plant alive today, forming mycorrhizae, a word that literally means fungus root. It's an astonishing intimacy. Under a microscope, you can see thin fungal filaments curling like veins through the root cells, wrapping around them in delicate spirals. Molecule by molecule, they trade what each lacks. The plant gives carbon, the solidified breath of the sky, and in return receives phosphorus, nitrogen, and water drawn from the deep soil. It's not parasitism, it's not charity, it's balance. If you could somehow zoom out and watch this exchange unfold across the entire planet, you'd see that this isn't a niche occurrence, it's the rule. Nearly 90% of all plants rely on this partnership. Grasslands, rainforests, tundras, even the moss growing on your garden wall is part of the same ancient deal. The green world we see is just the visible half of an invisible collaboration. This is symbiosis in its truest form. Not one life feeding on another, but two lives, building something larger than either could alone. And the fungi don't just help plants grow, they help them endure. In times of drought, the filaments act like tiny wicks, pulling moisture from the soil to thirsty roots. In poor ground, they extend a plant's reach far beyond what its roots could achieve alone. Some fungi even protect plants from disease, forming a kind of living shield around the root zone. Others help seeds sprout faster, or guide young saplings toward the shade or light they need most. It's as if the fungi remember what the soil has been, through what grew there, what died there, what nutrients are left behind. They act as archivists of the Earth's memory, passing their knowledge to each new generation of plants through chemistry instead of language. If we think of evolution as a story, this is one of its most beautiful chapters. The moment life realized that cooperation could be more powerful than competition. There's something profoundly human about that realization, though it long predates us. We tend to celebrate independence, standing tall, growing alone. But the truth is, nothing in nature thrives in isolation. Even the mightiest redwood depends on millions of invisible fungal threads wrapping around its roots, feeding it, anchoring it, keeping it alive through centuries. Symbiosis is not just a biological fact, it's a philosophy. It says that strength comes from connection, that survival is shared. If you walk through an old-growth forest and see a ring of mushrooms near the base of a tree, you're seeing that partnership made visible. Those mushrooms are the fruiting bodies of the fungi that live intertwined with the tree's roots. When they appear, it's as if the underground world is reaching upward to remind us it exists. Some indigenous cultures have always known this. To them, the forest isn't a collection of separate beings, but one great spirit, each plant, animal, and fungus part of a single living body. In their stories, the mycelium is described as the veins of the earth carrying life force through the soil. Modern science, in its own careful language, has finally caught up with that truth. It's easy to forget that fungi don't photosynthesize. They can't make their own food from sunlight. They survive entirely through exchange, through the generosity of others. And yet without them, nothing else could grow. The irony is beautiful. The organisms that rely most completely on others are also the ones that make independence possible. Every forest, every field, every flower blooming on a windowsill is a monument to that quiet collaboration. Even we humans owe our lives to it. The grains that feed us the vegetables that sustain us the oxygen we breathe, all exist because of fungal cooperation. And when our bodies return to the soil, fungi will be there again, breaking us down into the minerals that feed the next generation. The circle closes seamless and eternal. In a way, fungi teach the same lesson over and over. There is no line between giving and receiving. The act of exchange is itself a form of life. Consider a desert after rain. Within hours, invisible spores awaken beneath the sand. Mycelium spreads, linking the roots of hardy desert plants together, helping them share what little moisture remains. Even in the most hostile places, the old partnership endures. It never sleeps, never forgets. And when disaster strikes a fire, a flood, a volcanic eruption, the first living things to return are fungi. They reclaim the soil, digest the ash, and prepare the way for green to return. They are the patient restorers of the earth, rebuilding what time and chaos undo. So much of the human story has been written around the idea of dominance of one species conquering another, of survival through strength. But beneath all that noise, life itself has always been whispering a different story, that true endurance comes from relationship. If you were to sit quietly beside a tree and think about what lies beneath you, might feel something like recognition. The same principles that govern your body circulation exchange, mutual dependence, govern the soil as well. You breathe in oxygen, trees exhale it. You exhale carbon, fungi deliver it to roots that feed the trees again. You're part of the same equation, just written in a different form. It's easy to forget that as we hurry through our separate lives, but the soil doesn't forget. Every handful of dirt holds the blueprint of partnership minerals, from mountains carbon, from leaves, threads of fungi, still reaching, still remembering. And perhaps that's why simply being in nature feels restorative. When you stand among trees, you're surrounded by the world's oldest friendship. The air smells different there, because you're breathing in the product of cooperation, the chemistry of balance itself. In the end, fungi and plants remind us that coexistence isn't an accident. It's the foundation of everything. The green world didn't rise because life learned to fight. It rose because life learned to share. So when you look at a forest, try not to see a collection of individuals. See a partnership, millions of quiet alliances, whispering beneath the soil, keeping the planet alive. See the story of how the world learned to work together, because that, more than anything else, is how life endures. If you've ever wandered through a forest after rain, you know the feeling, the air rich and damp, the scent of earth sweet and electric, and suddenly there they are, a small burst of color in the leaf litter, a delicate dome rising from moss like an idea taking form. Mushrooms. They seem to appear overnight, as if the forest decided to decorate itself while you slept. But what you're seeing is not the whole organism. It's not even most of it. The mushroom is simply the visible breath of something much larger, the brief surface expression of a mind that lives in the dark. Beneath your feet, the mycelium, that network of threads and filaments, is always thinking in its own slow chemical way. When it decides the time is right, it builds upward cell by cell, pushing through the soil in silence. The process is ancient and deliberate. Every mushroom is a message from the underground world, a signal that the hidden network is alive, aware, and ready to reproduce. If trees are the lungs of the planet, then mushrooms are its dreams. They appear, suddenly vanish quietly, and leave behind invisible seeds, spores that drift away like fragments of thought. In the damp woods of Japan, bioluminescent mushrooms glow faintly at night, green lanterns scattered across fallen logs. In the pine forests of Europe, brilliant red Amanita muscaria, the fairy tale toadstool, dots the forest floor, both beautiful and deadly. In tropical jungles, strange fungi sprout in shapes that look like coral stars or dripping wax. Each form is a different expression of the same idea, the underground mind reaching out. When scientists study how mushrooms grow, they're often stunned by the precision. A single cap can contain billions of spores, each one capable of traveling miles on a current of air. The mushroom builds itself perfectly to release them gills or pores designed to maximize airflow, timing its growth to humidity and temperature. It's engineering without engineers, intelligence without intention. There's something hypnotic about it, the way these fragile structures rise from decay, shining for a few days before collapsing back into the soil. The cycle repeats, endlessly birth, bloom, death, return. But the network beneath remembers. Each fruiting strengthens the whole, spreading genes and extending the web farther. And if we look closely, we realize that mushrooms are not just agents of decay. They are architects of transformation. They turn the remains of the old into nourishment for the new. Their enzymes can digest almost anything: wood, plastic, oil, even radiation. Where humans see waste, fungi see opportunity. In Chernobyl's abandoned reactors, scientists discovered black fungi growing directly on the walls of irradiated chambers, feeding on radiation itself. In polluted rivers, fungal mycelium breaks down heavy metals and toxins. In forests, it decomposes the dead into soil again. Nature's recycling system, refined over hundreds of millions of years, still outperforms anything we've built. It's almost eerie how something so quiet, so soft, holds such power. And yet mushrooms don't boast. They bloom humbly, vanish gracefully, and leave the world better than they found it. The more we learn about them, the more they resemble an alien intelligence, not because they come from elsewhere, but because they challenge what we think intelligence looks like. Mycelium doesn't have neurons, yet it solves problems. It doesn't have memory in the human sense, yet it learns. It doesn't have a body, yet it behaves as if it does, expanding, retreating, adapting to change. When scientists built computer models of mycelial growth, they noticed something extraordinary. Its structure is nearly identical to the architecture of neural networks. The same logic that guides information through our brains seems to guide nutrients through the soil. The forest's mind and ours are built from the same geometry, branching, recursive, self-correcting. Think about that. Every time you look at a mushroom, you're seeing a glimpse of nature's original neural network, one that predates brains by hundreds of millions of years. The Earth was already thinking long before we arrived to name it. The philosopher Terence McKenna once described mushrooms as the Earth's natural internet. He wasn't entirely wrong. When mycelium stretches through the soil, it connects distant plants, trees, and bacteria into a single living system. When mushrooms fruit, they send spores into the sky, riding the wind to carry information, genetic code adaptation, survival across continents. In a sense, every spore is a tiny message in a bottle floating through air instead of sea. And those spores are almost indestructible. They can survive freezing, cold, burning heat, and even the vacuum of space. Scientists have found fungal spores clinging to the exterior of the International Space Station, still viable after years exposed to radiation. It's not impossible that fungi could travel between worlds, seeding planets like cosmic gardeners. If life ever reached Earth from the stars, fungi may have been its couriers. But even if they never left this planet, they have already colonized every corner of it. On mountaintops, in deserts, under glaciers, and inside animal bodies, even ours fungi thrive. They live in our lungs, our skin, our gut. They help digest our food and decompose us when we die. We are not separate from them. We are their continuation. In some cultures, mushrooms are seen as messengers between realms, living bridges between life and death, earth and sky. And when you think about it, that metaphor feels almost literal. They rise from decay, reaching upward to release life again, then sink back down. They connect what's above to what's below, what was to what will be. Maybe that's why mushrooms feel so mysterious to us. They don't fit neatly into our categories, not plant, not animal, not quite anything else. They exist in the in-between, thriving where others cannot. There's something deeply meditative about watching one grow. In time-lapse videos, you can see the cap unfold, like a slow breath, droplets forming on its edges, like sweat, then evaporating as the gills open. It's as though the forest itself is exhaling. And in that breath lies a lesson. To grow, you don't always need to move fast. You just need to reach quietly in every direction, to feel, to connect, to bloom when the time is right. When you walk through the woods, remember that every mushroom is both an ending and a beginning. It's decay, rebirth, memory, and creation woven together. It's the underground mind showing its face for just a moment, a thought breaking the surface of the earth. Perhaps that's why people across cultures have always been drawn to mushrooms as food, as medicine, as symbols. The Greeks believed they were lightning solidified into life. The Chinese called them the elixirs of immortality. The Maya used them to speak with gods. And even today we still feel their pull, not just because they nourish or heal us, but because they remind us of something older, deeper and truer, that everything alive is connected by invisible threads. So the next time you see a mushroom, stop for a second. Kneel if you can. Look closely. You're not just looking at a fungus. You're looking at the forest's thought, the planet's whisper, the breath of an ancient intelligence that has never stopped growing. It only pauses, waiting for the next drop of rain to wake it. You might never see the network it comes from, but it sees you. It feels your footsteps through the vibrations in the soil. It knows the warmth of your breath as you lean closer. You are part of its story, just as it is part of yours. And when you leave, when your steps fade into the hum of the forest, the mycelium continues to stretch, unseen beneath where you walked, slowly, patiently, eternally, writing the next sentence of the world beneath our feet. There's a quiet moment in every forest that pours after rain when the world smells alive again. The scent is earthy sweet, a mix of leaf soil and something older, the perfume of decay. Most people breathe it in without thinking, but that smell is the signature of transformation. It's the work of fungi, the invisible alchemists who take what has fallen and return it to life. Decomposition is a word that sounds unpleasant, It carries echoes of endings of rot and ruin. Yet to fungi, decomposition is not destruction. It's creation in reverse, a sacred unraveling that feeds everything that will ever grow again. Look around a forest floor. It's littered with fallen branches, leaves, and the remnants of lives long gone. Without fungi, that debris would stay forever. Trees would fall and never fade. Nutrients would lock away inside their wooden coffins, and the forest would slowly suffocate beneath its own past. But fungi arrive like quiet caretakers. They send out tendrils, lace themselves into the wood, and begin their patient work. They don't rush. They never need to. Their enzymes dissolve the toughest molecules, lignin, cellulose, the armor of trees. No other creature can do this as effectively. The very structure that lets wood stand tall against storms eventually bows to fungal chemistry. If you were to watch the process over time, it would feel like witnessing a kind of mercy. The fallen tree softens, darkens, and begins to crumble. Moss takes hold, insects arrive, and tiny threads of mycelium weave through its core like veins. Years pass, and the tree dissolves completely, but it hasn't disappeared. It has become soil nutrients and life again. In that sense, fungi are the ultimate recyclers, the keepers of balance. They remind the world that nothing ends, not really. Everything just changes form. Sometimes the composition can even look beautiful. Certain species of fungi glow faintly in the dark, illuminating rotting logs with an emerald light. The ancient Greeks called this foxfire, and for centuries, no one knew why it happened. Today, scientists believe the glow attracts insects that help spread spores. But it's hard not to see it as symbolic light, born from decay beauty, emerging from what we call ruin. In that glowing wood, you can see the philosophy of the forest, that death is never waste and loss is never final. But fungi don't just break down plants. They handle everything: fallen animals, bones, leaves, even the smallest microbial remains. Each kind of matter has its own specialists. Some fungi feed exclusively on dead insects. Others live inside animal dung, releasing spores that wait to be carried away by the next creature to pass by. There are even fungi that decompose other fungi, recyclers closing the smallest loops in nature's endless circle. It's easy to think of this process as cold or mechanical, but it's not. It's intimate. When a creature dies in the wild, the first to arrive are often spores invisible in the air. They land softly on the body, unnoticed, and within hours they begin growing, not in malice, but in purpose. Their enzymes break bonds, release carbon, restore balance. It's as though the earth has a built-in healing system, one that quietly ensures nothing is wasted. Without fungi, life, as we know it, would stop. Forests would turn to graveyards. The ocean floor would fill with unrotted plankton and dead plants. Even the air would change, because much of the carbon dioxide we breathe comes from fungal decomposition, returning elements to the cycle. They are the unseen breath of renewal. And perhaps in a way, they are also philosophers. They teach the universe its most patient truth, that to decay is to give back. In human culture, we avoid decay. We scrub it, seal it, bury it. We equate cleanliness with denial of the process that sustains us. But fungi have no such fear. They lean into impermanence. They take what falls and make something useful of it. That lesson echoes through every ecosystem. When fire sweeps through a forest, fungi are often the first to return. Their spores survive the heat waiting in the soil. When the ashes cool, they awaken, feeding on charcoal and carbon, preparing the ground for new seeds. It's as if they know that renewal requires loss, that creation is always followed by letting go. There's a species called Pyranema omphalodes, sometimes nicknamed the fire lover fungus. Its spores can lie dormant for decades until flames pass overhead. Then, almost overnight, the soil blooms pink with its fruiting bodies. The sight is surreal, delicate pastel domes emerging from black ash, out of devastation color, out of ruin abundance. And that's the paradox. Fungi live by destruction as rebirth. They remind us that endings are never wasted energy. They're simply another form of motion. Even the smell of decay, that rich, earthy musk, is life's signature perfume. When we inhale it, we're breathing in molecules released by decomposition, geosmin and terpenes, the same compounds that signal rain, soil, and growth. Without decay, even beauty would lack its fragrance. In a way, fungi embody a kind of cosmic empathy. They take what no one else can love, the broken, the spent, the forgotten, and turn it into nourishment. They don't ask whether something deserves to live again. They simply ensure that it does. If the forest is a temple, decomposition is its prayer. It's the daily ritual through which the sacred is renewed, and it's not limited to forests. Beneath oceans, fungi digest sunken wood and whale bones. In deserts, they break down the remains of shrubs and insects buried under sand. In tundra, they persist through frozen months, ready to thaw the instant warmth returns. No climate, no condition can silence them for long. When astronauts discuss the possibility of terraforming other planets, some suggest that fungi might be the first to go, not humans, not plants, but spores. Because if anything can transform sterile rock into soil, it's the strange genius of decomposition. It's a quiet technology the universe already perfected. And perhaps one day, long after humanity has passed, fungi will still be here, breaking down our monuments, our cities, our bones, turning them into new landscapes. In that sense, they are the ultimate sculptors of time. There's something oddly comforting in that thought, that no matter how far we push or how high we build, the fungi will one day reclaim us, not with violence, but with patience. They will take our ruins and make them fertile again. In decay, we return home. So the next time you walk past a fallen log covered in mushrooms, pause a moment, touch the bark, feel how soft it's become. That softness is not weakness, it's generosity. It's the sign that the forest is still breathing, still renewing itself through the art of letting go. Fungi remind us that life doesn't move forward by resisting decay, it moves through it. That the end of one thing is the beginning of another. That transformation is not something to fear, but something to trust. Because deep down, everything that falls apart is only making room for what will rise next. And in the heart of that process, quiet and unseen, the fungi are smiling. If everything on Earth is destined to decay, then fungi of all creatures should understand impermanence best. They are the caretakers of endings, the masters of transformation. And yet, in their endless dance with death, some fungi seem to have found a loophole, a way to stretch life beyond its ordinary limits. It begins in the deep forests, in the damp soil that never fully dries. Beneath fallen leaves and rotting wood, certain fungal colonies have been alive not for decades, but for thousands of years. The Armillaria ostoi of Oregon, often called the humongous fungus, spreads across nearly 10 square kilometers of woodland. It weighs hundreds of tons. Scientists estimate it could be over 8,000 years old. Older than the pyramids, older than recorded human language. And yet it has no face, no bones, no single body. It's a collection of threads constantly growing, shedding, and renewing itself. When one section dies, another thrives. When winter freezes its outer skin, the center remains alive, waiting. The organism's immortality lies not in resisting change, but in accepting it completely. Imagine that a life that never ends, because it's always willing to let go of itself. In that sense, fungi have solved the problem that haunts us all: how to endure without clinging. Their secret is flexibility. They are not one thing, but many, always shifting, blending, renewing. A single network can stretch across centuries, moving from tree to tree, absorbing their deaths and turning them into food for others. It's a kind of immortality that isn't defiance of death, but collaboration with it. Humans write myths about eternal life, the fountain of youth, the elixir of immortality, gods who never die. But the fungi have been living that truth quietly all along. They have found a way to persist, not by freezing time, but by joining its flow. Consider the humble yeast. It's not a majestic forest fungus, not a sprawling network in the soil, just a microscopic cell floating in water. And yet, in its simple existence lies the same secret. Yeast cells reproduce by budding. One divides into two, then two into four, each carrying a copy of the original's essence. None of the individuals survive for long, but the lineage never breaks. Every loaf of bread, every glass of wine, every sip of beer you've ever tasted carries echoes of that unbroken chain, a single genetic conversation stretching back millions of years. And then there are the fungi that quite literally resurrect themselves. The Lentinus tigrinus, for example, can dry out, completely lie dormant for years, and then awaken with the first drop of water. The mycelium cracks open, rehydrates, and begins to grow as though nothing had happened. It's not true immortality, but it's close, a kind of biological patience that borders on the miraculous. Even more astonishing are the spores' tiny capsules of potential that fungi release into the air. Some spores can survive for decades, even centuries, carried on the wind or buried in frozen soil. They endure scorching heat, ultraviolet light, and radiation strong enough to destroy DNA. In 2014, researchers found viable fungal spores in 100 million-year-old amber. They were dormant since the time of dinosaurs, waiting patient, silent, and when placed in water, they stirred back to life. That's the power of fungal time. It doesn't flow the way ours does. It loops, pauses, folds back on itself. To a fungus, a century is just a nap. But immortality isn't always gentle. In the tropics, parasitic fungi like Ophiocordyceps infect insects, taking over their bodies and controlling their movements. When the host dies, the fungus sprouts from its remains, releasing spores to continue the cycle. It's gruesome but effective, a kind of death-driven reincarnation. The fungus ensures its survival, not through endless life, but through endless transformation. It's hard not to see poetry in that. For fungi, immortality isn't about refusing to die. It's about knowing how to become something new. Even on a microscopic scale, this pattern repeats. Fungal cells exchange genetic material through fusion. Two threads, meeting and merging, sharing DNA like whispers in the dark. This constant recombination means no individual fungus truly ends where another begins. Their identities blur, dissolve, and continue elsewhere. The line between self and other becomes meaningless, and that perhaps is their greatest secret. They've escaped death by escaping individuality. In our world, we cling to boundaries. We say, this is me, that is you, this is alive, that is gone. But in the fungal world, such divisions dissolve. A spore can become a network. A network can divide into many, and those many can merge again. The same genetic song echoes through countless voices overlapping in harmony. To live forever, fungi don't need eternity, they just need connection. Maybe that's why their presence feels so comforting in the forest. We sense somehow that they've seen everything before the rise and fall of trees, the bloom and wither of civilizations. Their patience makes our lives seem brief, but meaningful, like sparks in a long night. When you stand in an old forest and breathe in the damp, earthy air, you're inhaling spores, microscopic fragments of countless generations. They enter your lungs, settle on your clothes, cling to your hair. You carry them with you just as they've carried the memory of ancient rains, ancient suns. It's not superstition, it's biology. In every breath, a few particles of that fungal immortality join your body's story. And someday when you return to the soil, they'll be there waiting, ready to continue the conversation. There's a quiet comfort in that circular logic. The fungi don't mourn the passing of what was. They simply use it to build what will be. Their immortality is communal, not personal. It belongs to the system, not the self. Imagine if we lived that way, aware that our lives were threads in a larger tapestry, and that our only real task was to stay woven to keep the pattern going. How different the world might feel if we measured our worth not by how long we endure, but by how deeply we connect. Because in truth, we are already part of that pattern. The same carbon in our bones once belonged to ancient trees, to mushrooms that grew before humanity had a name. We are all of us, the reincarnations of everything that came before. The fungi simply never forgot that. When rain falls in the forest and a new mushroom rises overnight, it's not a beginning or an end. It's just the network breathing in again after a long pause, an old pulse continuing in a new shape. That's immortality, fungal style. No permanence, no resistance, just the endless willingness to become. And maybe as you drift towards sleep tonight, you can let that thought settle in, that you too are part of that endless cycle. Your breath, your body, your thoughts, all woven into the quiet persistence of the living earth. Somewhere beneath the surface, the mycelium stirs, humming its slow, eternal song. It doesn't rush, it doesn't rest, it simply is. And as long as it exists in some small way, so do you. There's a story unfolding right now under the leaves. A story so strange that if it weren't real, you'd think it came from a horror film. In the damp heart of tropical forests, a single spore drifts through the air, invisible and weightless. It lands on the exoskeleton of an ant, a soldier on its daily march. The ant doesn't notice. It wipes its legs, grooms its antennae, and continues. But within hours, something begins to grow inside it. The fungus has found a home. Microscopic filaments begin to thread through the ant's tissues, not killing it, but taking control. Slowly, carefully, the fungus infiltrates its muscles and nervous system, releasing chemicals that bend the creature's will. The ant starts acting strange. It leaves its colony. It wanders aimlessly, climbing higher than it ever would on its own. And then, at the perfect height on the underside of a leaf bathed in humid shade, it clamps its jaws down tight, its final act. The fungus kills its host and grows outward through its head, forming a long stalk that releases more spores to rain down on the forest floor below, ready to infect the next victim. The forest is full of this quiet horror, a choreography of manipulation so precise it feels intelligent. This is Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, sometimes called the zombie ant fungus. It doesn't just invade its host, it pilots it. It makes the ant die in the exact position that ensures the fungus's survival at a height and angle ideal for spore dispersal in a patch of air that keeps it moist but not soaked. It's so calculated, so perfect, that scientists still struggle to explain how the fungus knows what to do. It doesn't have a brain yet. It behaves like a strategist, and the ants, they've learned to fear it. In infected colonies, healthy ants can detect the faint chemical scent of spores on their companions. They carry infected individuals far from the nest and drop them into isolation, an act of mercy and defense. The colony's survival depends on this grim quarantine. It sounds ruthless, but in the forest, this balance between life and death is ancient and precise. The fungus isn't evil, and the ants aren't victims. They are two notes in a single song, predator and prey, written into the same symphony. The more we study these parasitic fungi, the more bizarre they become. Some can control not just ants, but spiders, cicadas, and even beetles. Each fungus evolves to match its host perfectly, like a key fitting a lock. Some can even mimic the scent of the insect's mates, luring them in to spread infection. Others grow inside their host's brain, without ever touching it, directly controlling behavior, chemically, like a puppet master pulling invisible strings. It's easy to see why humans are fascinated and frightened. The idea that a tiny organism can seize control of another's mind challenges our sense of autonomy. But what if control isn't the right word? What if it's communication, a dark, primal form of symbiosis that we don't yet understand? Under the microscope, these fungi look almost beautiful translucent filaments, branching like frost on glass, shimmering with life. The infection begins delicately molecule by molecule until the fungus has rewritten the ant's behavior completely. And then, once its mission is complete, it retreats, leaving behind the stalk, a grave marker, a monument, and a warning, all in one. This phenomenon isn't limited to the tropics. Even in temperate forests, there are parasitic fungi that control plants instead of insects. Some release chemicals that make grasses grow taller, ensuring their spores catch the wind. Others cause leaves to change color, early tricking animals into eating them and spreading their spores through feces. The forest, it turns out, is full of subtle manipulations. Everything influences everything else, not through malice, but through need. And yet, the precision of these interactions hints at something larger: intelligence without intention. Fungi don't plan yet. They behave as if they understand strategy. They don't reason yet, their timing is impeccable. To some scientists, that suggests a new kind of cognition, one not bound to neurons or brains, but to chemistry and pattern. This concept, called distributed intelligence, proposes that thought itself might exist anywhere there's feedback and adaptation. In this sense, mycelium, cities, even the internet, all think in their own ways. The difference is only in speed and form. Fungi, in their slow chemical rhythm, may have been the first thinkers, organisms that learned not just to react, but to direct. Think about what that means. The earliest blueprint of control wasn't written in brains, but in spores. And if you zoom out from this haunting story of ant and fungus, you begin to see a pattern. The entire ecosystem is built on persuasion. Flowers seduce insects with color and scent. Trees signal each other through chemicals in the air. Even bacteria exchange genes through plasmids, whispering instructions for survival. Control, then, is just another form of communication. The fungi that guide ants are not villains. They're reminders that life is porous, that boundaries between self and other are more flexible than we like to believe. It's unsettling, but also strangely beautiful, because in the end, even the most macabre relationships in nature serve balance. When the fungus kills the ant, its body decomposes, feeding soil microbes and plants. The spores that fall create food for other creatures. Death becomes sustenance. What began as possession ends in renewal. If you could hear it from the perspective of the forest, it wouldn't sound like horror. It would sound like harmony, the steady rhythm of transformation. In the stillness, after a tropical storm, the forest glistens with moisture. Steam rises, and tiny particles float in the air, fungal spores drifting like mist. Somewhere an ant feels a tickle on its shell. Life continues its endless cycle of exchange. Even in decay there is precision. Even in death there is purpose. And in that strange purpose lies a question that lingers longer than fear. If life can learn to control another's mind so completely, then where exactly does self end? We tend to think consciousness lives inside us, but fungi remind us it might also live between us, in the chemical conversations that pass from body to body unseen. The zombie ant fungus may sound like nightmare fuel, but it's also a mirror. It reflects a truth about life that's both humbling and awe-inspiring, that nothing in nature truly acts alone. Every movement, every breath, every impulse is part of a web stretching across time, species, and purpose. Even manipulation, when you step back far enough, becomes a form of harmony. So the next time you walk through a humid forest and feel that earthy smell rising, remember, under your feet, these dramas are unfolding entire worlds of will and surrender, of control and release. The forest floor is not silent. It's alive with whispered instructions, with ancient instincts still playing out exactly as they have for millions of years. Somewhere below the surface, an ant is climbing its final leaf. The wind stills, the fungus grows, and the forest, ever patient, exhales. When the air is still and the forest holds its breath, there's something moving that no eye can see, a silent snowstorm of life drifting through sunlight and shadow. Spores. They float in clouds so fine that a single breath can contain thousands, maybe millions of them. You've inhaled them all your life, though you never noticed. They're on your skin, in your lungs, resting quietly on every leaf, every window, every atom of the living world. Each spore is a message, not a word in any human sense, but a signal from the fungal realm, a promise, a dream, a seed of possibility. In that tiny grain lies an entire genetic library, a blueprint for rebuilding the network that created it. When a mushroom fruits and releases its spores, the event looks almost magical. A gentle mist rises beneath the cap, invisible, except in a shaft of light where it appears like smoke curling upward. But look closer, and it's not rising, it's falling. Billions of spores descending in slow motion, their journey just beginning. The forest becomes a quiet broadcast station, and the air itself turns into language. Each mushroom speaks in the only way it knows, by releasing more of itself into the world. Scientists studying spore dispersal often use high-speed cameras to capture what we can't see. The images are hypnotic, microscopic particles, bursting from gills or pores, propelled by tiny jets of water. Some mushrooms even create their own microclimate, generating heat and moisture that helps spores lift into the air. Others rely on wind insects or raindrops to carry them. A drop of rain hits a mushroom's surface, and thousands of spores leap into flight, riding the turbulence like travelers on invisible roads. Every species has its own method, its own accent in the language of spores. The puffball releases great smoky plumes when touched, as though exhaling. The stinkhorn uses scent, the odor of decay, to attract flies, which carry its sticky spores on their legs. In tropical forests, birds and beetles act as couriers, ferrying spores across continents. It's an ancient system of communication, older than pollen, older than flowers. Long before trees learned to bloom, fungi were already speaking to the wind. But spores don't always drift far. Some land just a few centimeters from home. Others travel for years, suspended in the upper atmosphere, crossing oceans and mountains before finding a place to rest. And when they finally touch down, most never awaken. The soil might be too dry, the temperature wrong, the chemistry unfriendly. Only a few, 1 in a million, find the perfect home. And when they do, something miraculous happens. The spore cracks open. A filament uncoils, stretching like a single thought across the grain of soil. It begins to branch, to explore, to connect. Within hours, it's searching for another filament, another voice. When they meet, they fuse, and the conversation begins again. The birth of a new network, another mind beneath the ground. You could call this process reproduction, but that word feels too mechanical. What's happening is closer to renewal. The forest doesn't make copies, it makes continuations. Each spore carries not just DNA, but the memory of an environment, a set of instincts honed by the conditions of its ancestors. When it grows, it carries the wisdom of centuries. That's why some scientists think spores are more than just seeds. They're the fungal version of speech. They allow one generation to whisper to the next, to share what worked, what failed, and what might come next. If you've ever watched dust floating in sunlight through a window, you've seen something like spores. But unlike dust, these particles are alive. They can sense moisture, chemical gradients, even the presence of other spores nearby. It's as if the air itself is alive, with tiny questions, each one searching for an answer. And here's the beautiful part. The same particles that sustain forests also travel across entire ecosystems, connecting them. Spores from a rainforest might settle in distant tundra. Desert fungi might find a home in a mountain valley. In this way, fungi are global storytellers. They don't stay still, and their stories never end. In 2019, researchers collected samples of air at 3,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean and found fungal spores drifting among the clouds. Some had traveled thousands of miles. They were in essence the sky's pollen, keeping the planet's ecosystems in quiet conversation. Even the rain that falls on your window carries messages written in spores. They seed not just soil but clouds themselves, helping moisture condense into droplets. In other words, fungi help summon the rain. The planet breathes through its spores. And yet this invisible world also touches ours in ways both delicate and profound. When you catch the scent of damp earth after rain, that intoxicating aroma of freshness, you're smelling geosmin, a compound released by soil microbes and fungi as spores awaken. That smell, the one that tells us it's safe to step outside again, is the scent of spores remembering how to live. For most of human history, we never realized how much we owed to this silent system. Ancient cultures treated mushrooms as messengers between worlds because they appeared suddenly after rain, as if delivered from nowhere. In truth, they were the punctuation marks in a long sentence written by spores drifting for days or decades before finding their resting place. Even our myths reflect this. The ancient Egyptians believed mushrooms were born from lightning symbols of divine communication. The Aztecs called psilocybin mushrooms Teonanacatl, the flesh of the gods, because they seemed to let people hear the hidden language of the earth. And in a way, that's exactly what they do. When the psychoactive compounds in certain mushrooms interact with the brain, they dissolve the boundaries between self and environment. Patterns blur, time slows. Many who experience it describe the sensation of hearing or seeing the world breathe, of feeling the pulse of connection that fungi live by every day. Scientists studying these effects have found that psilocybin temporarily rewires neural pathways, increasing communication between regions of the brain that usually remain separate. It's almost poetic. The organism that built the world's first communication network can also awaken that network inside us. But even without visions or chemicals, there's a quiet way to listen. Go into a forest when it rains. Sit still, watch the mist drift, and feel the air cool on your skin. The spores are all around you, invisible but present. The forest is speaking softly, renewing itself one breath at a time. You can think of it as poetry or as biology. Both are true. Each falling spore is a syllable in a language older than any written word, a language that says only one thing over and over again, in infinite variations: continue. And it does. Every breath you take contains that command. Every handful of soil, every breeze through the trees carries spores, carrying the message of life's persistence. They don't demand attention. They don't need witnesses. They simply exist, quiet letters floating through time, connecting the past to the future. If you could slow time enough to see them, all the billions of particles gliding through a beam of sunlight, each carrying a fragment of the world's memory, you might realize something humbling. The planet doesn't just speak, it sings, and the fungi are its choirs, their voices scattered on the wind. So the next time you see light filtering through dust or mist, imagine what it really is: an unseen rain of spores falling through the day, rewriting the story of life in ways we'll never fully grasp. And if you listen closely, not with your ears, but with that deeper sense that notices wonder, you might hear it. the soundless whisper that fills the air around us, always saying softly but endlessly, grow, change, live again. If you ever find yourself deep in a forest on a moonless night, long after the last bird call fades, try this: stop walking. Let your eyes adjust. The darkness isn't as complete as it first seems. Slowly you'll notice something uncanny. A faint emerald shimmer appears at the edges of fallen logs, like ghostly veins pulsing under the bark. A soft green glow seeps from the moss, from the rot, from the earth itself. It's not your imagination. The forest is glowing. This light, eerie quiet, alive comes from fungi. Bioluminescent mushrooms, sometimes called foxfire, have fascinated people for thousands of years. Early explorers described trees burning in the rainforests of Brazil, logs that glowed bright enough to read by. Soldiers in the American Civil War nicknamed them angel lights and used them to illuminate trenches. But what's happening isn't magic or combustion. It's chemistry. The oldest kind of chemistry, life turning energy into light. The process is remarkably similar to what happens in fireflies or deep-sea creatures. Inside the cells of glowing fungi, enzymes act on a molecule called luciferin, a word derived from Latin, meaning light bringer. When luciferin reacts with oxygen, it emits photons visible to the human eye as green light. But unlike fireflies, mushrooms don't flash. They burn steadily, like lanterns that never flicker. Why do they glow? That's the question that kept scientists guessing for centuries. Some thought it was accidental, a byproduct of metabolism. Others suspected communication. Today, we know the light serves a purpose: attraction. The glow draws insects that carry spores to new locations, the way flowers use color and scent to lure pollinators. It's a quiet form of advertisement, a living sign that says, "Come closer, take me with you." In a sense, it's fungal poetry. Where animals shout for attention, fungi whisper with light. There are over 80 known species of bioluminescent fungi scattered across the world. In tropical rainforests, where nights are thick and humid, entire patches of ground can shimmer like a submerged galaxy. In Japan, Mycena lux coeli grows on fallen oak leaves, tiny points of light scattered like stars on the forest floor. In Australia, the ghost fungus Omphalotus nidiformis clings to tree trunks in glowing fans so large they can be seen from the road. Even in temperate forests, you might find faint halos of light radiating from rotting wood after a storm, the mycelium itself glowing as it digests. Stand among them long enough, and you start to feel that the forest is breathing in light and exhaling darkness. There's something mesmerizing about this kind of illumination. It's not harsh or cold, not like electric light. It feels soft, organic, the color of moonlight filtered through leaves. It seems to pulse in rhythm with the heartbeat of the forest. Some who have seen it say it feels alive, as if the light itself is conscious. Perhaps that's why ancient cultures revered glowing fungi as signs from the spirit world. In Southeast Asia, villagers once believed that glowing mushrooms marked places where ancestors wandered at night. In parts of Europe, they were called fairy fire, said to light the paths of spirits or warn travelers away from danger. In Aboriginal lore, glowing wood was thought to contain the souls of stars fallen to earth. And maybe in their own way, those myths were right. Because bioluminescent fungi connect the heavens and the ground, light born not from the sky but from decay, stars that grow from death. If you pick up a glowing branch, though you shouldn't let it stay where it is, you'd notice the glow comes not from the bark, but from within. The light seeps out through cracks and pores, gentle but persistent. It's as if the forest refuses to let its dead stay dark. Underneath the microscope, those same glowing filaments look like silver threads stitched through black velvet. Each one hums with a faint pulse, the light traveling along it like slow lightning. It's not constant, it brightens and fades like breathing. Scientists have even recorded tiny fluctuations in brightness, synchronized with changes in oxygen and moisture, suggesting that the glow is not random at all, but responsive, a dialogue between the fungus and its surroundings. There's another theory more poetic than proven, that says the glow isn't just to attract insects, but to repel others, a quiet warning to animals that might disturb the delicate fruiting bodies. After all, many glowing fungi are toxic. Their light then might be a sign not only of invitation, but also of boundary. Come close, but not too close. Either way, the message is unmistakable light as language. What's extraordinary is that this glowing system has survived for tens of millions of years. Fossilized evidence suggests that ancient fungi were already bioluminescent long before mammals walked the earth. That means forests were glowing in the night, back when the world was ruled by ferns and giant insects. Imagine that an entire planet, where the only light after sunset came from the stars above and the mushrooms below, and it still happens every night, all around us. You just have to know where to look and to have the patience to let your eyes adjust to the darkness long enough to see it. Modern technology is now borrowing from this ancient chemistry. The genes responsible for fungal luminescence have been mapped and transferred into plants, allowing scientists to create glowing vines, glowing tobacco, even glowing trees that need no electricity to shine. The same light that once guided insects through the forest may one day light our streets, our homes, our cities, a gentle green glow powered by life itself. There's something profoundly circular in that. The light we invented to chase away darkness may one day be replaced by the light that was here all along. But perhaps the most haunting thing about bioluminescent fungi isn't the glow itself, it's the silence of it. Fire crackles, bulbs buzz, neon hums, but the light of fungi is utterly still. You could stand beside it for hours and it would never flicker or speak. It would simply shine patient and eternal, the embodiment of everything slow and enduring. In that way, glowing mushrooms remind us of the deeper rhythm of life, that illumination doesn't always mean revelation, that brightness can be quiet. So if you ever have the chance, find a forest at night and wait. Let your heartbeat slow until you can feel the earth's. You'll start to notice subtle changes, the sound of dew dripping, the smell of moss, the faint chill of night air on your skin. Then, from the corner of your vision, a green glimmer will bloom faint as breath. You'll realize the forest isn't sleeping, it's dreaming, and the fungi are the ones keeping the lights on. They glow not for spectacle, not for praise, but because that's what they've always done. It's their way of remembering that even in darkness, life still hums. And if you stand quietly enough, you might see what few people ever do, the world illuminated from within. Death shining softly, whispering the same truth that every forest knows, that light never really leaves. It just changes hands. Memory, we often think, belongs to creatures with brains, to humans, dolphins, ravens, or elephants. It's the privilege of neurons, of synapses sparking in living tissue. But what if memory doesn't begin in the mind at all? What if it began underground, long before brains evolved in the dark, humid soil of ancient Earth, inside the slow and patient networks of fungi? Recent experiments have revealed something astonishing. Mycelium can remember, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but biologically. It learns, adapts, and recalls. The discovery came quietly, as most revelations about fungi do. In 2021, scientists from the University of Toulouse grew fungal networks on petri dishes, connecting them with tiny electrodes to measure electrical pulses, the faint signals fungi use to communicate across their threads. When the researchers placed a block of food, an oat flake, at one end of the network, the fungi sent pulses along their filaments, mapping the route. Then they removed the food and tested again later. Even after the stimulus was gone, the same electrical pattern appeared, as if the fungus remembered where the reward had been. It didn't have a brain or even a single nerve cell, and yet it retained information. This wasn't just coincidence. When obstacles were placed between the mycelium and its goal, it learned to navigate around them more efficiently the next time. Some networks even anticipated recurring changes in humidity or temperature, adjusting their metabolism hours before the environment shifted, as if recalling past experiences and preparing for the future. Memory without neurons. Thought without thought. To the human mind, that's difficult to grasp. But perhaps our definition of memory has been too narrow all along. Fungi store information, not in synapses, but in the structure of their network. Each branching filament, each hypha thickens, retracts, or strengthens, depending on what it encounters. Those physical changes alter how nutrients and signals flow later on. The network, in essence, rewrites itself in response to experience. Every choice leaves a scar, a trail, a path remembered. If you've ever walked through a forest and noticed the way roots twist around rocks, how paths form, where footsteps repeat, you've already seen the same principle at work. Life learns by tracing itself over time. Inside a fungal network, this process happens constantly. Where food is plentiful, the mycelium grows dense, reinforcing its connections. Where it finds nothing, it thins out, retracts, and forgets. The result is a living map of memory, updated second by second, shaped by survival and experience. It's eerily similar to how human brains form habits. Neurons that fire together wire together. Pathways that go unused fade. A fungal network does the same, just more slowly, more quietly, and on a scale as vast as forests. That means that beneath our feet, every patch of soil is a kind of living archive, a record of rain and drought, feast and famine, imprinted into the shape of fungal threads. When new roots grow into that soil, they tap into that archive. Through chemical and electrical cues, they read the past, sensing which areas are fertile, which are toxic, which carry hidden danger. The forest, in other words, remembers through fungi. You could call it ecological memory. And yet there's something strangely emotional about this idea. If fungi remember even without awareness, then every forest holds echoes of itself. Ghost memories of storms, fires, seasons, and generations of trees long gone. When you walk through an ancient woodland, the quiet you feel isn't emptiness. It's the weight of memory stored in every root and filament. Imagine kneeling in that forest, placing your hand on the soil. Beneath your palm, countless threads are alive, their patterns shaped by centuries of experience. They remember floods that drowned saplings, winters that froze rivers, lightning strikes that split trees. They remember the births of mushrooms that bloomed and vanished before humanity even existed. The ground beneath you is not dead earth. It's a living consciousness stretched thin across time. Some researchers have gone even further, proposing that the electrical pulses within fungi bursts lasting a fraction of a second resemble primitive language. The voltage changes in patterns that mirror the frequency of human speech. If that's true, then perhaps the forest's memory is also its voice, the hum of a system constantly recording and retelling its own story. It's a haunting thought that every leaf that falls, every root that grows, every drop of rain that seeps through soil becomes part of the forest's autobiography. A biography written not in ink, but in chemistry and current. And maybe that's why the forest feels alive to us, not because it's conscious in the human sense, but because it carries memory the way we carry heartbeat. In one experiment, scientists cut a fungal network in half. The mycelium responded instantly, redirecting its growth to reconnect the separated parts as though searching for itself. When the two halves finally touched again, their electrical rhythms synchronized, merging into one pulse. If that's not memory, it's something even deeper: recognition. Recognition implies identity, however primitive, a sense of, I have been here before. And if the forest can recognize itself, can respond, can remember, maybe it also dreams in its own slow way. Dreaming, after all, is just memory rearranging itself into meaning. When we dream, our minds replay fragments of the day, mixing them into strange new stories. Perhaps the forest does something similar, replaying old chemical pathways, reliving ancient weather patterns, rehearsing the rhythms of life and death that sustain it. The next time it rains, it remembers how to respond. The next time lightning strikes, it recalls how to heal. Every night, when darkness falls and photosynthesis sleeps, the underground network keeps pulsing faint electrical waves, rippling through miles of soil. The forest's heartbeat, its dreaming mind. If that sounds poetic, that's because it is. But poetry in nature is often just science we haven't named yet. It makes you wonder what happens when a forest dies, when clear-cutting or drought severs the network. Does the mycelium forget, or does the memory linger, dormant, waiting for rain to awaken it again? There are places where forests have returned after centuries of absence, and when they do, the fungi rise first, as if they still remember where the trees once stood. They send out threads into the empty ground, tracing the outlines of an ecosystem that has been sleeping. Memory, it seems, never really dies, and maybe that's why walking through a forest can feel strangely familiar, even if it's one you've never seen before. Something in the soil recognizes you. The fungal world remembers the rhythm of footsteps, the warmth of bodies passing above. It has felt life before. It knows the pattern. If you listen closely enough, you might even feel it listening back. A pulse, a shimmer, a subtle echo in the dark. The memory of rain, the memory of fire, the memory of every breath the earth has ever taken. And when you leave, when your steps fade into the distance, that memory remains recorded in the microscopic circuits of a world that never stops remembering. Because fungi are not just part of the forest's body, they are its mind, and that mind, ancient and patient, never truly forgets. For most of human history, we've thought of mushrooms as something to fear, or to eat food, poison, or mystery. They appear from nowhere, feed on decay, and vanish without warning. But for as long as there have been people watching the forest, there have also been healers, shamans, and wanderers who saw something else in these strange forms. They saw medicine, they saw wisdom, they saw gateways. Fungi have always had a secret relationship with the human body. Before we had chemistry or microscopes, people simply noticed what worked. They learned that a bitter bracket fungus could stop bleeding when pressed to a wound, that another could quiet a fever or soothe pain. Some mushrooms restored strength, others induced dreams. In ancient China, the reishi, the mushroom of immortality, was reserved for emperors and monks. In the Siberian tundra, shamans ate the red-capped Amanita muscaria to glimpse what lay beyond this world. And across Central America, the Aztecs and the Mazatec used psilocybin mushrooms in rituals to speak with the gods long before anyone knew what a neurotransmitter was. To the modern mind, it might sound like myth, but the deeper we study fungi, the more those old intuitions prove true. The same kingdom that decomposes forests has given us some of our greatest medical miracles. Penicillin, the first true antibiotic, was born from a mold, Penicillium notatum, that accidentally grew on Alexander Fleming's petri dish in 1928. That contamination changed medicine forever. One fungus saved millions of human lives by teaching us how to fight bacteria. And that was only the beginning. From the soil, we've since extracted dozens of powerful drugs, antifungals, immunosuppressants, cholesterol-lowering statins, cancer-fighting compounds. The drug cyclosporin, for example, made organ transplants possible. It came not from a lab, but from a fungus living quietly in the dirt of Norway. Even today, many of our most promising new medicines don't come from invention, but from discovery, from listening to the chemical language fungi have been speaking for millions of years. The irony is beautiful. The same organisms that dissolve death also preserve life. But fungi don't just heal the body, some heal the mind. In the past 2 decades, scientists have returned to studying psilocybin, the compound found in magic mushrooms, with a new kind of reverence. What once seemed like a counterculture experiment has now become serious neuroscience. Clinical trials show that under careful guidance, psilocybin can ease depression, anxiety, and trauma in ways that conventional medicine often cannot. What's fascinating isn't just the chemical effect, it's the experience itself. People who undergo psilocybin therapy often describe feeling as though their minds reconnect, that rigid thought patterns dissolve, that fear loses its shape, that the world becomes one seamless whole. Brain scans show why psilocybin temporarily disables the brain's default mode network, the system that defines the sense of I. With that filter, different regions of the brain start communicating freely, forming new pathways. The mind, freed from its loops, can reorganize itself. It's as if the fungi lend us a brief glimpse of their own perspective: connection instead of separation, flow instead of form. For a few hours, the barriers that isolate us dissolve, and we remember what every forest already knows: we are not alone. Indigenous peoples never described this experience in clinical terms. They spoke instead of unity of spirit, of hearing the earth's voice. The Mazatec priestess, Maria Sabina, called the mushrooms Niños Santos, holy children, because they revealed hidden truths with innocent clarity. Her ceremonies were quiet, reverent, guided by songs. Participants often wept, not from fear or hallucination, but from recognition, as though something inside them had been waiting to be remembered. That sense of reconnection may be the fungi's most profound gift. Modern life, for all its power, has separated us from the ecosystems that sustain us. We walk on concrete, eat from packages, sleep beneath artificial light. The mycelial web beneath us, the one that once fed and guided our ancestors, has grown quiet in our awareness, but not in reality. It still hums below, patient as ever. And sometimes, through the doorway of a mushroom, we can still hear it. Even without the psychedelic kinds, other mushrooms work their own subtler magic. Lion's mane, a shaggy white fungus, resembling cascading icicles, stimulates the growth of nerve cells. Studies show it can improve memory, focus, and mood. Cordyceps, a parasitic fungus that grows on caterpillars in the Himalayas, enhances oxygen, uptake, and endurance. Turkey tail mushrooms strengthen the immune system. Chaga fights inflammation. Shiitake lowers cholesterol. Each species, in its own quiet way, extends the web of healing that fungi began weaving long before we named it. It's humbling to realize that every step we take in a forest is over a living pharmacy, one that has been refining its chemistry for 500 million years. And perhaps it's no coincidence that the same organisms that decompose and renew the forest also restore balance in us. They understand cycles. They specialize in transformation. That's what healing truly is: not erasing pain, but converting it into wisdom, nourishment, growth. Fungi know this better than anyone. They turn waste into life. Why wouldn't they help us do the same? The reishi mushroom, called lingji in Chinese, is said to calm the spirit and extend life. In Taoist tradition, it's the symbol of spiritual immortality, not eternal youth, but harmony with the constant renewal of the cosmos. To eat reishi was to align oneself with the rhythm of nature. Perhaps that's the real secret of longevity, not avoiding death, but syncing with the cycles that outlast it. In the Amazon, shamans who use psilocybin mushrooms speak of them as teachers, not tools. They say the fungi are ancient intelligences that communicate through vision and intuition, guiding humans toward balance. Whether we believe that literally or metaphorically doesn't matter much. The message remains, remember your connection. Modern neuroscience now echoes that wisdom. When the brain is flooded with psilocybin, the rigid boundaries that define me and world dissolve. Activity in the regions associated with fear and ego quiets. The same happens curiously during deep meditation or prayer. The fungi, in their own biochemical way, help us step outside ourselves and in doing so bring us back home. There's something poetic about that symmetry, fungi healing both body and soul, matter and mind decay and renewal. They close the gap between science and spirituality without ever meaning to, because that's the essence of their existence connection. Whether they're linking tree roots, recycling the dead, or rewiring the human brain, fungi always return life to itself. They are the Earth's great reconcilers, turning division into dialogue, loss into learning. And maybe that's why their medicine feels so profound. It doesn't add anything foreign to us. It simply reminds the body of what it already knows: how to adapt, how to release, how to grow again. Next time you hold a mushroom in your hand, think of what you're touching. Not a plant, not an object, but the fruit of a consciousness that has shaped the planet's biology, the chemistry, and even our inner worlds. It's a healer older than our species, and somehow still our closest ally. So when people say, mushrooms open the mind, perhaps they mean something deeper. They reopen the world, the living, breathing web that was never closed, only forgotten. And maybe as you drift into sleep tonight, you can imagine that vast underground network reaching gently toward you, whispering its quiet medicine. You are not separate. You are part of the pattern. Heal, then give back. That's the oldest prescription there is. If you've ever watched mist rising from a forest after rain, you've seen the planet breathe. The air glows faintly, as if the trees are exhaling light itself. The sound is almost imperceptible. The drip of water from leaves, the sigh of soil releasing vapor. And somewhere in that invisible current, floating higher and higher into the atmosphere, are the spores of fungi. They are so small that a single cubic meter of air can hold tens of thousands of them. You can't see them, can't feel them, but they are there, drifting upward, carried by rising heat, spiraling into the sky. And what they do up there, in the cold, thin air above the treetops, is nothing short of miraculous. They make rain. This idea, once dismissed as poetic fancy, is now accepted science. Spores, it turns out, are not just passengers of weather, they are its architects. When moisture condenses in the atmosphere, it needs something to cling to, a tiny seed around which droplets can form. Fungal spores provide that seed. Their rough, complex surfaces and organic chemistry attract water molecules, allowing clouds to grow heavy enough to release rain. In this way, forests don't just respond to rain, they summon it. They breathe water into the sky and call it back again. It's a self-sustaining loop of generosity. Trees feed fungi with sugars. Fungi release spores. Spores help form clouds. Clouds return rain to nourish trees. The system is ancient and self-balancing, a quiet heartbeat that has pulsed through Earth's climate for millions of years. In the Amazon, scientists discovered that fungal spores account for up to a third of all biological particles in the air during the wet season. Without them, rainfall would falter, the forest would dry, the rivers would shrink, and the living world would unravel. The irony is breathtaking. The same organisms we associate with decay, the recyclers of death, also keep the cycle of water alive. Imagine the forest canopy at dawn, the air thick and heavy with humidity. As the first shafts of sunlight warm the leaves, the forest exhales vapor. Tiny droplets rise, carrying spores with them, invisible balloons of potential. Higher and higher, They drift until they reach cool layers of air. Their moisture gathers around them, clouds form, and soon the sky darkens again. The spores fall back to earth as rain, soft, nourishing, perfect. And within that rain, the spores land ready to begin again, to grow new threads, to feed the next generation of roots. Every storm in this sense is a conversation between the sky and the soil, a call and response written in water. Even deserts, those places we imagine as lifeless, sometimes owe their rare rains to fungi. Spores carried on the wind from distant forests can act as nuclei for rain clouds thousands of miles away. They seed life where life seems impossible. Fungi are not just inhabitants of the earth, they are engineers of its balance. For centuries, indigenous cultures understood this intuitively. The Maori of New Zealand called the forest the lungs of the sky. Amazonian tribes performed rain ceremonies, not to conjure water from nothing, but to honor the cycle that fungi and trees maintain together. They knew that rain isn't just weather, it's communion. And perhaps that's what the earth itself has been trying to teach us. Everything we do to the soil, we eventually do to the sky. When forests are cut, when soil is stripped bare, the fungal networks die and the rain grows weaker. The balance breaks. Without spores rising into the air, clouds thin and regions once lush become dry. The climate doesn't simply change, it forgets how to remember rain. In that light, reforestation is not just about planting trees. It's about reviving memory, the memory of water, the memory of breath. When fungi return to the soil, they restore the dialogue between land and sky. It's humbling to realize that the weather itself is partly an act of life. Every drop of rain that falls on your window may have been born from a single spore drifting unseen above a forest half a world away. And it's not just rain. Fungal spores influence lightning too. In storm clouds, the charged surfaces of spores can alter how electricity builds and discharges. Some scientists even believe they help regulate the frequency of lightning in tropical storms, as if the Earth's electrical heartbeat depends in part on the breath of fungi. There's poetry in that idea that the same threads that weave the soil also spark the sky. You can imagine the scene from space, the great green sweep of a rainforest, exhaling clouds each afternoon, thunderheads, rising lightning, flickering rain, falling all choreographed by the smallest architects imaginable. The spores rise and fall, rise and fall. Each journey a verse in the eternal song of water. In the Pacific Northwest, where dense forests meet the ocean, you can feel this pulse in your bones. The air there seems heavy with memory mist curling between cedars like breath. Every inhalation tastes faintly of mushrooms and moss of rain that has fallen 1,000 times before. The locals call it living weather clouds, so close you could touch them, rain so soft it feels like skin. When you walk there, you begin to understand what fungi know that nothing ever truly leaves. Water evaporates, travels, returns. Life decays, transforms, blooms again. The system doesn't end. It exhales. And you, standing there with droplets forming on your eyelashes, are part of that cycle too. The moisture you breathe out joins the same current. The water in your blood once flowed through rivers, through roots, through clouds, seeded by spores. Every atom in you has been rain. It makes you wonder, when you stand in a storm, are you merely being rained on, or are you coming home? When lightning flashes, it illuminates the veins of the clouds. They look so much like the branching threads of mycelium that it's almost uncanny. The same patterns repeat from soil to sky, from micro to macro. It's as if the world keeps drawing itself in the same shape, filament, flow, connection. That shape, the branching fractal of life, might be the closest thing nature has to a signature. Fungi, trees, rivers, lightning, lungs all mirror each other. They all move through the same principle, to give and receive, to circulate. That's what the rain really is. Circulation, made visible. When the storm ends, when the last droplets slide down the leaves and sink back into the earth, the fungi wait. They absorb the moisture swell and begin again, breaking down the old, feeding the new. Their spores will rise once more when the sun returns. The cycle continues, infinite, balanced, patient. Next time you hear rain tapping against your window, pause for a moment. Remember that it's not just weather, it's memory, a whisper from the forests, a gift from fungi carried on the breath of the planet. And if you listen closely enough, you might hear it saying what it has always said from the beginning of time: to this very second I fall, so you may rise. I return, so you may grow. I am not ending, I am beginning again. That is the voice of the rainmakers, the silent architects beneath the soil, turning decay into clouds, clouds into life, and life back into water once more. Deep beneath the forest, in a world of cool shadows and damp silence, a quiet economy is always in motion. Invisible to us, the fungi are trading, storing, and redistributing the planet's wealth, not gold or silver, but carbon. They are the Earth's oldest bankers, keeping the books of life with precision that no human accountant could ever match. Every tree, every leaf, every breath of green owes its strength to that balance. Photosynthesis may capture carbon from the air, but it's fungi that decide what happens next, how much stays locked away underground, and how much returns to the sky. Here's how the process works. When a tree absorbs carbon dioxide, it turns that gas into sugars through sunlight, but the tree doesn't keep all those sugars for itself. Up to 40% of them are sent downward into the roots as a kind of underground payment. The tree releases droplets of glucose and other compounds into the soil, feeding its fungal partners. In return, the fungi deliver water and minerals, and perhaps most importantly, they store some of that carbon in their vast mycelial networks. You can think of the soil as a living vault, its walls made of threads. Every fungal filament is both a storage chamber and a transport line. Some of the carbon remains in the fungal cells themselves. Some becomes trapped in tiny soil aggregates, pockets so small that oxygen can't reach them, protecting the carbon for centuries. In this way, fungi act as the planet's natural carbon custodians. They take what the sky gives and hide it safely underground. For millennia, this cycle has kept the planet's atmosphere in balance. Forests grew fungi, stored their carbon, and life flourished. But when humans began cutting down trees and disturbing soil, that balance broke. The fungal vaults cracked open, and ancient carbon escaped back into the air. Today, scientists believe that soils hold more carbon than all the world's plants and atmosphere combined, and fungi manage a large share of that invisible fortune. If we could understand and protect their networks, we could slow climate change not through machines or geoengineering, but simply by helping the Earth remember how to breathe properly again. The key lies in something called glomalin, a sticky protein produced by arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. It coats soil particles like glue, trapping carbon and strengthening the soil's structure. This single compound, discovered only in the 1,990 seconds, might be responsible for a third of all carbon stored in land-based ecosystems. It's nature's own sealant, preventing the planet from exhaling too much of its history at once. When a forest thrives, its fungi thrive too, and their vaults deepen. But when a forest burns, or a field is plowed, those vaults burst open, releasing centuries of stored carbon in days. The air grows heavier, the cycle falters, and yet even after such destruction, fungi don't despair. They rebuild. Their spores survive fire and drought, waiting patiently for rain to return. When new seedlings take root, the fungi re-establish their networks, connecting the young trees to the lingering remnants of the old. The forest remembers itself, and the carbon begins to flow downward again, one sugar molecule at a time. It's tempting to think of fungi as passive storage systems, but they are more like managers deciding how much to save and how much to spend. When nutrients are abundant, they invest in growth, expanding their mycelial webs across the soil. When times are lean, they tighten their hold, conserving resources. They even redistribute carbon between plants, sending it from the rich to the poor, the healthy to the struggling. The fungal economy runs on fairness, not greed. This system of exchange extends far beyond forests. In grasslands, fungi form intimate partnerships, with roots capturing carbon even in the most fragile soils. In tundra, beneath layers of permafrost, they hold ancient carbon, frozen in time. In deserts, they cling to the thin moisture film on sand grains, storing what little life they can. They are everywhere unseen, but essential, the accountants of existence. What's even more mysterious is that fungi don't just store carbon, they can sense it. They recognize chemical cues from roots and alter their growth patterns accordingly. They can detect when plants are stressed, when the soil grows too acidic, when drought looms. Their responses aren't random, they're strategic. This ability to plan suggests a kind of ecological intelligence, not conscious thought, but adaptive wisdom, shaped by eons of experience. Every decision they make, to hold or release, to grow or rest, shapes the fate of the atmosphere above. If humans could truly grasp this process, it would change how we see the Earth. We'd realize that climate change isn't just about what we emit, but about what we've forgotten to protect the soil beneath our feet, the fungal networks holding our carbon in trust. There's a quiet heroism in that. The fungi don't demand recognition. They don't build monuments. Their greatest work is invisible, a slow, steady act of generosity that spans geological ages. Imagine for a moment what the world would sound like if we could hear carbon moving. You'd hear it whispering downward, through roots flowing like a current, through threads settling into the soil with a sigh. Every leaf falling in autumn would be a note in that symphony. Every decomposing log, a chord of renewal. The forest would sound less like silence and more like breathing, inhale, exhale, store, release. And what if the world's climate really does have a pulse, not measured by temperature or wind, but by the rhythm of fungal respiration? When the planet warms, the mycelium exhales. When it cools, it inhales. In this slow heartbeat, you can almost hear the memory of balance, the same balance that fungi have kept since long before our species existed. In some indigenous traditions, the earth spirit is described as the keeper of buried breath. Perhaps that's what the fungi truly are, guardians of exhalations turned to stone, the stewards of air made solid. As we look for ways to heal the planet, perhaps the answer isn't just in the sky, but beneath it. Reforestation, regenerative farming, and soil restoration are in essence invitations for fungi to resume their ancient work. Give them roots to partner with, and they will lock away carbon faster than any machine. Give them respect, and they will repay the debt of centuries. They are not just keepers of the carbon cycle, they are keepers of time. Each layer of soil is a memory of weather, of seasons of life, lived and decomposed. When you dig into the earth, you're not just holding dirt. You're holding history breath turned into matter, matter turned into promise. And maybe that's what the fungi are whispering as they weave through the dark. Remember what the air once felt like. Remember how to give back more than you take. The forests hear, the soil listens, and when the rain returns, the spores rise again, carrying carbon memory and the quiet promise of balance into the sky. The underground keepers never sleep. They simply wait for us to notice them. Long before the world was green, when the continents were barren and the air still stung with volcanic ash, something astonishing rose from the rocks, towers of life that seemed to defy logic. They were not trees. They had no leaves, no roots, no bark, and yet they reached as high as houses. For more than a century, scientists argued about what they were. Some said algae, others coral. But now we know the truth. They were fungi. Prototaxites, as they're called, lived around 420 million years ago, long before forests, before flowers, before even insects filled the skies. Imagine the earth, then the land mostly empty, the ground slick with lichen and moss, the tallest plants no higher than your knee. Against that low horizon, these giant fungi stood like monuments. Some grew 8 meters tall, others spanned a meter across. Their surfaces were rough, pitted like stone. Inside, rings of filaments twisted upward in endless spirals, the architecture of mycelium scaled to colossal proportions. No one is certain how they reproduced, or even what they looked like when alive. Did they glow faintly at night? Did they release clouds of spores that shimmered like dust in the dawn? All we know is that they were the first giants of land pillars of life on a young planet, still learning how to breathe. To walk among them, had we been alive then, would have felt like stepping through an alien landscape. The air would have smelled of minerals and sulfur, the ground would have squelched underfoot, and towering above these massive fungal trunks would rise through the haze, absorbing carbon dioxide, releasing oxygen, and quietly engineering the first true soils. They weren't just strange, they were essential. By breaking down rock and trapping carbon, fungi like prototaxites reshaped the planet's atmosphere, preparing the way for plants to colonize land. Without them, the first forests might never have taken root. It's a humbling thought: before there were trees, there were their teachers. For decades, paleontologists doubted that such creatures could have existed. Fungi, after all, are fragile. Their threads rot, their bodies crumble. How could something so ephemeral leave fossils? Yet in the deserts of Canada, the cliffs of Saudi Arabia, and the hills of Scotland, scientists have found them petrified cross-sections of ancient fungi, their internal structures preserved, like frozen lightning. Under the microscope, their filaments intertwine in familiar patterns, the same mycelial logic we see beneath our feet today. The network hasn't changed. The architecture of survival once invented needed no revision. Even now, new fossils keep turning up evidence that prototaxites wasn't alone. There were others, smaller, stranger, fungal life forms, some resembling tangled roots, others forming thin mats that covered miles of terrain. These early fungi turned bare rock into the first fertile soil, using acid to release nutrients from minerals. They began the process of making land habitable, not just for plants, but eventually for animals, including us. You could say that fungi were the original terraformers. They didn't conquer the land with force, but with patience, dissolving, digesting, transforming. Stone by stone, they turned the dead into the living. Over millions of years, as plants evolved, leaves and roots, the old fungal giants faded away. Their era ended quietly, their bodies breaking down into the very soil they had created. Yet their influence never disappeared. Their descendants became the microscopic architects that still rule the underground world. Every forest today carries their legacy, their chemistry, their intelligence, their purpose. In a way, they still stand, though invisible. Every time a mushroom blooms, it's a whisper from that ancient lineage, a reminder that life's first architects are still here working in the shadows. When scientists measured the carbon isotopes in prototaxites fossils, they found something curious. The carbon ratios varied wildly from one specimen to another. In plants, those ratios are consistent, but in fungi, which absorb whatever carbon they can find, the numbers fluctuate. That variability became the clue that solved the mystery. It was proof that these giants were decomposers, not photosynthesizers. They fed on the dead long before there were forests to die. Even now, the same process continues. The fungi that build and break down life today are part of a continuous chain stretching back 500 million years. It's not a family tree, but a family web, each generation connected not by lineage, but by function. They have seen the world change from red to green to blue. They have witnessed 5 mass extinctions and survived them all. When meteor impacts darkened the sky, when glaciers swallowed continents, when fires turned oceans to steam, fungi endured. They waited, they adapted, they began again. Perhaps that's why their story feels timeless. Theirs is a legacy of persistence, of finding life in the ruins, of thriving where others fall. In many ways, prototaxites embodies the very spirit of fungi, quiet, patient, misunderstood, but absolutely indispensable. They remind us that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers beneath the surface, reshaping worlds without being seen. Picture for a moment one of those ancient towers standing alone on a rocky plain. A thin drizzle falls, and the light catches on its damp surface. Spores drift from its upper folds, rising like smoke into the dawn. Around it, the land is silent. No birdsong, no rustle of leaves. Yet from that silence, an empire is beginning. In the next 100 million years, those spores will give rise to smaller fungi that partner with the first plants. The partnership will evolve into mycorrhiza, the foundation of modern ecosystems. From that one towering spire will come forests, rivers, meadows, and eventually the breath of creatures like us. It's hard not to feel reverence for that lineage. Fungi didn't just inherit the earth, they built it. Even now, when you pick up a handful of soil, you're holding fragments of those ancient giants. Their chemistry preserved, their story ongoing. The minerals they unlocked still nourish today's forests. The carbon they stored still shapes our air. The intelligence they embodied still hums in the roots beneath our homes. In every sense, we live in the world they imagined. So the next time you walk through a forest and feel the ground soften underfoot, remember that you're stepping on the ghosts of the first builders. Their bodies are gone, but their work remains. The trees overhead owe their strength to those forgotten pillars. And maybe somewhere deep below the mycelium still remembers them, their patterns, their shape, their purpose. After all, fungi never truly forget. They keep the memory of the planet stored not in bones or fossils, but in the living architecture of the Earth itself. That's the quiet miracle of prototaxites. They remind us that the history of life isn't a ladder of progress, but a circle of exchange. The smallest threads can build the largest worlds. The humblest forms can outlast empires. Before the forests came the fungi. Before the green came the grey. And from their patient chemistry, everything that followed roots, rivers, rain, and reason began to grow. The first forests were not built by trees, but by their shadows. And those shadows still stretch beneath our feet. If you trace life backward far enough past forests and fossils, past oceans and single-celled ancestors, you end up in darkness. Not the kind that comes from the absence of light, but the fertile, shimmering dark that gave birth to everything. That darkness still lives in the soil, in the slow breathing of fungi, in the quiet process of decay. Decay is not death. It's the oldest form of transformation, the one written into the fabric of the universe. Stars collapse into dust, and that dust becomes planets. Leaves fall into soil, and that soil becomes new life. At every scale, from galaxies to mushrooms, the cosmos renews itself by falling apart. Fungi are the Earth's interpreters of this cosmic rhythm. They translate the great law of impermanence into daily action. Every rotting log, every decomposing fruit, every pile of fallen leaves is an echo of something that happens on a cosmic scale, the slow conversion of matter into possibility. When you walk through a forest after rain, and see the soft fur of mold covering a branch, you are seeing a miniature galaxy at work. The filaments radiate outward like spiral arms, each glowing faintly, with chemical reactions invisible to the eye. Sugars flow like starlight. Enzymes act like gravity-breaking complex structures into simpler forms. The network expands and contracts, feeding, creating, erasing a mirror of the endless cycles above. It's not an accident that the word spore sounds like star. Both are seeds. Both drift through space, searching for a place to land and begin again. In the same way that a supernova scatters the ingredients for new worlds, a mushroom scattering spores is creating the raw material for the next generation of life. Every puff of dust rising from a decaying stump is a tiny version of the cosmic wind that built us all. The poet and physicist Alan Lightman once wrote that decay is just the universe remembering itself. Fungi are that memory made tangible. They are the caretakers of the material, past the ones who make sure nothing is wasted, that every molecule returns to the cycle. Think of what happens when a body animal or plant falls to the forest floor. Within hours, fungi begin to grow. They break apart cell walls, release stored energy, and feed bacteria and insects. The process may seem grim, but it's astonishingly efficient. In a few months, what was once a distinct living form becomes indistinguishable from the soil that will nourish the next sprout. The atoms remain, they simply rearrange. Now imagine that same process on a cosmic scale. Stars too live and die. When they explode, they release carbon, iron, calcium, the elements that later form our bones, our breath, our blood. The universe is a compost heap of infinite patience. Fungi are its local expression. Every planet, in a sense, needs its decomposers, agents that keep the circle turning. Without them, systems stagnate. Energy would flow only one way, from creation to exhaustion. But with decay, the loop closes. The dead feed the living, and the living prepare the way for those yet to come. That's the real secret of the fungal kingdom. It doesn't believe in endings. It believes in transformation. Even the colors of decay, the rich browns, deep greens, ghostly whites, are the palette of renewal. Under ultraviolet light, fungal spores shine like tiny nebulae. Each carries within it the same atomic components, forged in the hearts of dying stars. When you pick up a handful of soil and let it crumble through your fingers, you're holding stardust that has passed through the bellies of mushrooms. Carl Sagan famously said, "We are made of star stuff." If he'd been a mycologist, he might have added, "and star stuff becomes soil through the work of fungi." There's something profoundly spiritual in that. We spend our lives seeking meaning in permanence, in things that last. But fungi remind us that the sacred is found in impermanence, in the quiet courage of letting go. The world doesn't endure by resisting change. It endures by embracing it. A single fallen leaf is a universe in miniature. Its veins mirror river deltas. Its cells hum with decay like cooling suns. When fungi digest that leaf, they're not destroying it. They're setting its atoms free, returning them to the great pattern that built galaxies. The same carbon that once caught sunlight on a branch might someday drift in your breath or sparkle in the eyes of a child. That's the cosmic nature of decay. Everything belongs to everything else. Ancient cultures sensed this long before microscopes or telescopes. In Hindu cosmology, the god Shiva dances the Tandava, the rhythm of destruction and creation. In Taoism, decay is not evil, but necessary yin balancing yang. The Egyptian god Osiris, lord of the underworld, was also the god of fertility. Death and renewal have always shared the same throne. Fungi embody that truth on Earth. They are the Shiva, the Osiris, the yin of biology dissolving form so that essence can continue. Their work is not to end things, but to keep the music playing even as the instruments change. You can see this rhythm not only in nature, but in yourself. The cells in your body are constantly decomposing and regenerating. Every few months, nearly all your skin has been replaced. The lining of your stomach renews every few days. You are at this moment both decaying and reborn. You are the forest breathing through time. Fungi don't see the line between life and death, because in truth, there isn't one. There is only transformation, like the steady turning of a cosmic wheel. Consider the ancient fungal networks, still thriving today. Mycelial webs, thousands of years old. They've seen trees come and go, glaciers advance and retreat. To them, a human lifetime is a flicker of light between two rains. And yet, in their slowness, they preserve the planet's long memory. The carbon they store in soil will someday rise again as air, then return, as rain, then as root, then as spore. It's a rhythm that mirrors the expansion and contraction of the universe itself. Physicists call it entropy. Mystics call it balance. Fungi simply call it life. When you stand at the edge of a forest and feel the cool breath of decay rising from the ground, you're breathing in the same chemistry that fuels the stars. The scent of wet soil, that intoxicating perfume, is the smell of cosmic recycling in progress. Every atom in your body has already been something else. You were once volcanic ash, ocean plankton, a mushroom's meal, a tree's exhale, and someday you will be again. Fungi don't mourn this fact, they celebrate it. Their entire existence is a hymn to impermanence. They bloom, release, vanish, and yet through that cycle, they shape the world more profoundly than any species that ever tried to last forever. Maybe that's the lesson hidden in the rot. Permanence is an illusion, but participation is eternal. When you walk in the forest next time, don't wrinkle your nose at the smell of decay. Inhale it. That scent is the heartbeat of creation. It's the same rhythm that hums through galaxies, oceans, and veins. The same rhythm that turns endings into beginnings. It's the smell of the universe remembering how to live again. Every time you walk across a patch of ground, you are treading on something vast, ancient, and alive. A world within the world. The roots of trees, the threads of fungi, the secret roads that carry life between them, all joined in one unbroken network. It's easy to forget that you're walking on an organism that never stopped touching itself. Everything below your feet is connected, and fungi are the hands that hold it all together. We often talk about connection in poetic terms, as if it were a fragile ideal or a human invention. But to fungi, connection is not philosophy, it's physics. It's the way existence operates. They remind us that nothing in nature stands alone, that separation is a story we tell ourselves to feel in control. The soil has no such illusions. It knows that strength lies in weaving, not in walls. That is the first lesson fungi teach: we survive by linking. In the fungal world, connection is constant motion, a current of exchange between individuals, species, even kingdoms. Trees share sugars through fungal threads. Grasses communicate through microbial networks. Bacteria hitch rides along hyphae, as if catching trains across underground cities. The entire biosphere is stitched together by a web of generosity. When scientists inject carbon isotopes into one tree, they can trace that carbon moving through the mycelium into others, sometimes hundreds of meters away. It's as if the forest has no clear boundary, only gradients of sharing. The success of one organism fuels the success of all. And here's what's quietly astonishing: fungi don't hoard. They give, they redirect, they respond. When one area grows too rich, nutrients flow outward. When another grows poor, the network compensates. No competition, no hierarchy, only balance. In that sense, the mycelial web is not just biology, it's wisdom in physical form. It shows us that the only real wealth in a system is circulation. Stagnant energy breeds decay, but shared energy sustains life. Imagine if human societies worked this way, not as pyramids, but as networks, not as economies of scarcity, but of flow. Imagine if we measured success not by how much we could keep, but by how much we could share. Fungi do not compete to dominate. They collaborate to persist. Their second lesson, then, is strength through surrender. In their quiet humility, fungi let go of control. They spread into environments they cannot predict, trusting that adaptation will find the path. When conditions change, they don't resist, they reconfigure. When nutrients vanish, they pause, shrink, and wait. When abundance returns, they expand again. It's a rhythm that humans once understood, but have long since forgotten. In our rush to conquer, we lost the art of belonging. Fungi have never made that mistake. They don't own the soil, they are the soil. Their power comes not from dominance, but from dissolving into everything else. And perhaps that's their deepest wisdom: to connect, you must dissolve. They blur the lines between individual and environment until the distinction disappears. In the mycelial world, there's no me and you, only us. Each thread both self and system. Each act of giving, also an act of becoming. It's this fluidity that allows fungi to occupy every imaginable niche. They live in volcanic vents in frozen tundra, inside animal guts between grains of sand. They move wherever connection is possible. Their flexibility is their immortality. To humans, that idea feels terrifying. We spend our lives building identities, defining boundaries, fearing loss of self. But fungi whisper that dissolution isn't death, it's belonging. They also teach us about listening. The fungal network doesn't issue commands, it listens. It senses subtle chemical changes, pressure, vibration, moisture. It interprets the needs of its partners and responds without noise or ego. The forest thrives because of this listening, the patient, continuous awareness that allows it to adapt faster than any single organism could alone. Modern science is just beginning to translate this silent language. We now know that fungi communicate through electrical impulses, sending information about resources or threats. These signals travel at speeds comparable to those in human neurons, though measured in milliseconds instead of seconds. Each pulse carries meaning, a slow Morse code written in ions. Imagine a world where communication isn't speech, but sensation, where knowing comes from feeling, not thinking. That's the fungal world conversation, as chemistry, empathy, as ecology. From that emerges another lesson. Communication is care. To listen is to nourish. To respond is to heal. If that sounds spiritual, it's because it is. Many ancient cultures saw fungi not as separate from divinity, but as expressions of it. In Siberian mythology, mushrooms were said to be pieces of the sky that fell to earth, connecting heaven and soil. In Amazonian belief, they were messengers of the great web of life, bridging the visible and invisible. Even modern mystics who use psychedelic fungi describe an overwhelming sensation of unity, of hearing the world breathe as one body. It's easy to dismiss those experiences as illusion, but perhaps they're glimpses of something truer than our waking perception. The fact that everything is in dialogue all the time. In fungi, that truth is literal. The mycelium under your feet right now may connect hundreds of species, each influencing the other in real time. When a beetle tunnels into a tree, the fungal threads around its roots hear the signal through chemical changes and prepare defenses. When drought arrives, they reroute water from wetter areas to drier ones. The forest is not a collection of individuals. It's a single organism with many faces. That understanding that deep into being is something humans once knew instinctively. We saw ourselves as part of a circle, not above it. Fungi still live inside that circle. They never left it. And so the fourth lesson: to endure, we must remember our belonging. When we destroy the soil, we destroy the web that sustains us. When we poison the ground, we poison the lungs of the earth. But when we nurture connection between species, between ecosystems, between each other, the web heals. It always heals. That's the hope hidden in the fungal story. Even when burned or broken mycelium regrows. It doesn't need perfection to begin again. It just needs contact, a single surviving thread, a single drop of moisture. The rest will follow. There's a moment in every forest after rain when silence deepens, and you can almost feel the threads below swelling with life. In that silence connection hums not as metaphor, but as physics. Nutrients move signals, pulse the earth, rewires itself. The same process happens in your brain when you learn something new. The forest and you are not opposites. You are parallel networks of remembering. To study fungi is to study relationship itself. It's to learn that cooperation isn't idealism, it's survival. That generosity isn't moral, it's mathematical. That everything living depends on everything else, and that the measure of life is not independence but interdependence. We are in the end walking expressions of the same law that governs fungi connection is existence. To disconnect is to disappear. Maybe that's why the forest feels like medicine. It doesn't just fill your lungs with oxygen, it reminds your body what wholeness feels like. Beneath you, the threads are humming, carrying messages older than language. You are part of us. You are never alone. Fungi teach this endlessly, tirelessly, without words or sermons. They show us that to be alive is to belong, and to belong is to give. And maybe that's the truest form of immortality, not living forever, but living woven into everything. Because what the fungi know, and what we keep forgetting, is that the only real boundary in the universe is the one we imagine. Beneath the illusion, everything is touching. Every heartbeat, every breath, every grain of soil is part of the same quiet miracle. Connection isn't something to find. It's what you already are. At the end of all journeys, whether it's a day, a lifetime, or an era, everything returns to the same place, the quiet below. The soil, the darkness, the soft hum beneath roots. That's where the story of life has always begun, and where it always finds its way back. The fungi are there, waiting as they have been, since before memory had meaning, patient, gentle, eternal. If you could listen to the Earth's surface with the sensitivity of a heartbeat monitor, you'd hear a low vibration, almost like a purr. It's the sound of roots exchanging water, of fungal filaments, breathing carbon, of the invisible chorus of life below us, murmuring in a single wordless song. That's the sound of everything finding its way home. We often imagine the underground world as a grave, a place where things end, but that's only the view from above. From within the soil is a cathedral. Each grain of earth is lit by invisible reactions, tiny flashes of energy, microbial exchanges of love and purpose. Every fallen leaf, every forgotten seed becomes part of a new design. In this silence, nothing dies alone, and nothing stays gone. When you walk through a forest in autumn and hear the crunch of leaves, you're hearing that sacred transformation in progress. Every sound is the world turning itself over an ancient promise being kept again. The trees above may sleep, but the fungi do not. They work through the night digesting what was preparing what will be. Close your eyes and imagine that you could sink through the soil, past the tangle of roots, past the layers of humus, deeper into the hum of the fungal network. Down here, light is not needed. Instead, the world glows softly with the luminescence of reaction, a million invisible processes happening at once, each one necessary, each one perfectly timed. You are surrounded by life in its purest form, quiet, giving, endless. You would find no hierarchy here, no ruler, no prey. The mycelium moves like water, threading through everything, turning decay into nourishment, memory into matter. It's the purest form of democracy nature has ever invented. Everyone contributes, everyone receives. Even the dead have a role, especially the dead. The deeper you go, the quieter it becomes, until sound dissolves into pulse. And if you listen long enough, you begin to realize that this pulse isn't separate from your own heartbeat. It matches you. The rhythm of the soil and the rhythm of your chest become the same. The boundary between your body and the earth fades, and you feel maybe for the first time what it's like to belong completely. That's the secret the fungi have been keeping since time began. We are not guests on this planet. We are its continuation. When you breathe out, the carbon in your exhale becomes food for them. When they decompose what remains of you someday, the atoms that once formed your thoughts will drift upward again through soil, through root, through leaf, into air, into breath, into someone else's lungs. The cycle closes like a slow, peaceful sigh. And maybe that's what eternity really means. Not immortality, but participation. Not standing apart from time, but moving with it, dissolving and reforming in an infinite dance. If you could ask the fungi what they believe, they might tell you that the universe is one body endlessly rearranging itself. The stars decompose into planets. Planets decompose into soil. Soil decomposes into trees. Trees decompose into light. And through it all, the fungi never stop weaving. They are the threads that hold the great fabric together. In every culture that has ever revered the earth, you'll find echoes of this truth. The ancient Greeks buried their dead with sprigs of myrtle or olive to symbolize renewal. The Egyptians imagined fields of eternal harvest nourished by the Nile. In Japan, the word tsuchi means both earth and origin. Across the world, the soil has always been seen not as an ending, but as a return, a coming home. Modern science in its own way has begun to agree. We now know that almost everything we value, fertile ground, breathable air, even stable weather, depends on the fungal web beneath us. Their quiet labor turns chaos into order, abundance into possibility. They are the original caretakers, the planet's first artists, painting landscapes out of decay. And yet they ask for nothing. No worship, no monuments, no gratitude. Their temple is the silence beneath our steps. Their prayers are the threads they spin through the dark. When you lie down at night and close your eyes, you're not so different from them. Your consciousness recedes underground. Your body softens, repairs, regenerates. You join for a few hours the great stillness that fungi live in perpetually. Maybe that's why sleep feels like home, because it returns us in miniature to the same place where life rests between beginnings. In the morning, the light returns, and we rise again like mushrooms after rain, like spores on the breeze. We begin our little day-long version of life's grand cycle. We take, we give, we transform. And at night we return again. Every day, a rehearsal for the larger return to come. To know fungi is to understand that there is no such thing as isolation. Even in death, we do not leave, we join. Our molecules are remembered, repurposed, sung into new forms. The earth keeps every note. The forest never forgets a body that has fallen into it. It absorbs, learns, and uses it to grow stronger. That's the same promise the fungi make to all things, that nothing you are will ever be lost. Not a breath, not a thought, not a kindness. Everything is threaded back into the pattern. Maybe that's why time in nature feels slower, softer. When you walk beneath old trees and smell damp moss, you sense that none of it is rushing. The fungi beneath your feet move at their own tempo, one suited to eternity. They know there's no finish line. The point is to keep the rhythm going, the rhythm of giving, of becoming, of returning. And so, if you ever feel small or unimportant, remember this: somewhere beneath you, a single filament of mycelium might stretch for miles, linking you indirectly to every tree, every flower, every breath of air you take. You are already part of the greatest living structure on Earth. You always were. The fungi don't announce this truth. They whisper it in decay, in rain, in the smell of soil after lightning. It's up to us to remember how to listen. So tonight, before you drift off to sleep, imagine the ground beneath your bed, not as cold stone, but as a living sea. Imagine it pulsing slowly, full of quiet conversations between roots and threads. Picture your breath sinking down into that sea, joining the slow tide of exchange that has kept this planet alive for billions of years. You're not above it, you're within it. And someday, when you finally lay everything down, you won't be leaving the world at all. You'll just be finding your way back to the quiet below where life never ends. It only begins again. Because that's what the fungi have always known, that the end is never an ending. It's only the earth dreaming itself into form once more.